You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. We're reading from the Mueller report. This is from Section 1, Part 1, and page 11. And this is from the part titled The Special Counsel's Investigation, which is describing the scope of it. The special counsel, the order stated, is authorized to conduct the investigation confirmed by then FBI Director James B. Comey in testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on March 20th, 2017, including 1, any links and or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump, and 2, any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, and 3, any other matters within the scope of 28 CFR 600.4. Appointment order. Section 600.4 affords the special counsel, quote, the authority to investigate and prosecute federal crimes committed in the course of and with the intent to interfere with the special counsel's investigation, such as perjury, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and intimidation of witnesses. End of quote. The authority to investigate, quote, any matters that arose during the investigation, end quote, appointment order B2, covers similar crimes that may have occurred during the course of the FBI's confirmed investigation before the special counsel's appointment. Quote, if the special counsel believes it is necessary and appropriate, the order further provided, the special counsel is authorized to prosecute federal crimes arising from the investigation of these matters. Finally, the acting Attorney General made applicable sections 600.4 through 600.10 of Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The acting Attorney General further clarified the scope of the special counsel's investigatory authority in two subsequent memoranda. A memorandum dated August 2nd, 2017, explained that the appointment order had been, quote, worded categorically in order to permit its public release without confirming specific investigations involving specific individuals, end quote. It then confirmed that the special counsel has been authorized since his appointment to investigate allegations that three Trump campaign officials, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, and George Papadopoulos, quote, committed a crime or crimes by colluding with Russian government officials with respect to the Russian government's efforts to interfere with the 2016 presidential campaign, or election, end quote. The memorandum also confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate certain other matters, including two additional sets of allegations involving Manafort, parenthesis, crimes arising from payments he received from the Ukrainian government, and crimes arising from his receipt of loans from a bank whose CEO was then seeking a position in the Trump administration, close parenthesis. Allegations that Papadopoulos committed a crime or crimes by acting as an unregistered agent of the Israeli government, and four sets of allegations involving Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to President Trump. On October 20th, 2017, the acting Attorney General confirmed in a memorandum the special counsel's investigative authority as to several individuals and entities. First, quote, as part of a full and thorough investigation of the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, the special counsel was authorized to investigate, quote, the pertinent activities of Michael Cohen, Richard Gates, redacted, Roger Stone, and redacted. Confirmation, quote, confirmation of the authorization to investigate such individuals, close quote, the memorandum stressed, oh, quote, does not suggest that the special counsel has made a determination that any of them has committed a crime, end quote. Second, with respect to Michael Cohen, the memorandum recognized the special counsel's authority to investigate, quote, leads related to Cohen's establishment and use of Essential Consultants LLC to, inter alia, receive funds from Russian-backed entities, end quote. Third, the memorandum memorialized the special counsel's authority to investigate individuals and entities who were possibly engaged in jointly undertaken activity with existing subjects of the investigation, including Paul Manafort. Finally, the memorandum described an FBI investigation opened before the special counsel's appointment into allegations that then Attorney General Jeff Sessions made false statements to the United States Senate and confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate that matter. The special counsel structured the investigation in view of his power and authority to, quote, exercise all investigative and prosecutorial functions of any United States attorney, end quote. Like a U.S. Attorney's office, the special counsel's office considered a range of classified and unclassified information available to the FBI in the course of the office's Russia investigation. And the office structured that work around evidence for possible use in prosecutions of federal crimes, assuming that one or more crimes was identified that warranted prosecution. There was substantial evidence immediately available to the special counsel at the inception of the investigation in May 2017 because the FBI had, by that time, already investigated Russian election interference for nearly 10 months. The special counsel's office exercised its judgment regarding what to investigate and did not, for instance, investigate every public report of a contact between the Trump campaign and Russian-affiliated individuals and entities. The office has included its investigation into links and coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Certain proceedings associated with the office's work remain ongoing. After consultation with the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, the office has transferred responsibility for those remaining issues to other components in the Department of Justice and the FBI.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak, whatever it may be for you. Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. It is Anything Goes Friday, but we've got also a packed Friday. In our second hour, our entire second hour, Congressman Ro Khanna, the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, will be taking your calls. In our third hour, Richard Painter is going to drop by. He's the former head of the ethics department in the George W. Bush White House. And he's talking about impeaching Trump and I believe Barr as well. We'll find out. And in our first hour, And, we'll be taking your calls. Anything goes Friday after this. But in our first hour, Guy McPherson is with us. Guy is the Professor Emeritus of Conservation Biology at the University of Arizona. His website, GuyMcPherson.com. He's also the author of Only Love Remains, Dancing at the Edge of Extinction, a new book published by Wood Thrush Publications, available in fine bookstores everywhere. And he's speaking tonight in Portland at Mother Foucault's bookstore at 7 p.m. Guy, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to chat with you today.
Or welcome to the studio. It's
right.
cool having you actually physically here. So, we've kind of got this spectrum of opinion on what, among people who are actually acknowledging climate change, on what it means and what the consequences will be. And Louise and I are going over to see our one-year-old grandson tonight. And I tend to put things in terms of what's going to happen in his lifetime. The most conservative among us are saying that by the time he hits 70 or 80, we're going to see massive changes in the world, if we don't do anything. And, his children or grandchildren are screwed, basically. The midpoint, what seems to be a scientific consensus, although you may dispute that, is that probably it's going to happen when he's in his 30s or 40s. You're suggesting that the crapola is going to hit the fan a whole lot sooner than that, and that in part, and you've got a broad spectrum of arguments which people can find anywhere on the internet or on YouTube, or over at arctic-news.blogspot.com, that, well, actually, instead of my trying to characterize what you have to say, what have you to say, Guy?
Well,
what do you think my grandson's fate is going to be? What's he going to see in his lifetime?
I'm at the tail end of a speaking tour that's been going for about 4.5 weeks. And on this entire speaking tour, I've been focusing on the various ways by which we could lose habitat for humans as animals. So we're vertebrates, we're mammals, we're animals. And we generally don't think of ourselves as animals. We think of ourselves as separate from the animal kingdom. But we are at the highest temperature ever experienced by Homo sapiens on Earth already. There are any number of means by which we could rapidly increase the global average temperature and therefore lose habitat for our favorite species. So that's what I've been focusing on rather than on a particular date or a particular year by which we might go extinct. I think that your grandson, unfortunately, doesn't have much of a run on planet Earth because we are so close to triggering any number of processes that would preclude habitat for humans. As one example, last month, April of 2019, a European group, and I don't recall the name, it's way too long for me to remember, and it's an undated report, but it's a synthetic report put out by a European group of scholars, and they conclude that exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline could lead to extinction of humanity as their worst case scenario. Well, we're already well beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline. So it could be that we have triggered the death by 1,000 cuts already. Or perhaps the guillotine will replace the death by 1,000 cuts through, for example, reduction of industrial activity or exacerbation of the self-reinforcing feedback loops that are going on right now, or loss of ice in the Arctic Ocean projected by a paper in the annual review of Earth and Planetary Sciences in 2012 to occur in 2016, plus or minus 3 years, and so on. So there's a number of means by which we could lose habitat for our favorite species. I can't imagine we won't cross one of those Rubicons in the relatively near future, meaning within the next few years.
Yeah.
And I want to be wrong. Don't.
Oh, I hope you're wrong.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who hopes I'm right, and that includes me.
Yeah, when I look at this, it seems that there's a series of stages here, and the question is, are we going to hit them in 3 years or 30 years? But certainly we're going to hit them within Arthur's lifetime. I think no matter what we do at this point. The first is the one that's disruptive to civilization.
Right.
And that's happening right now.
Right, absolutely.
We're seeing, right now Iowa is underwater. We're seeing 1,000-year floods. We've had a couple of 100-year floods here in Oregon, in the last couple of decades. It's, and these extreme weather events around the world.
Right. This civilization, like all its predecessors, depends upon the ability to grow, store, and distribute grains at scale.
Oh, look at the Epic of Gilgamesh. Look at what happened to Sumeria. I mean, 7,000 years ago, they engaged in monoculture, intensive agriculture, and they rerouted the Nile. And the consequence of that was that the soil absorbed so much salt that nothing would grow. And, what used to be the cedars of Lebanon and a heavily forested Iraq, which is where Sumeria was, is now desert.
Forests greet us and deserts dog our heels.
Yeah. So number one is destruction of civilization. Number two is, mass die-offs of humans. As civilization collapses, our access to medications, then you would see the explosion of very virulent diseases that we're just kind of barely holding off right now. And then stage three would be, kind of this is even way beyond the Blade Runner world, because, technology's gone. We're back to maybe where we were 25,000 years ago, when humans had developed some fairly advanced technologies, fire, rope, but we're also the most adaptable of the species, it seems. I mean, you've got humans who are living in the Arctic, and you talk about an environment that is not conducive to any kind of life, but they figured out how to build houses out of snow, and they figured out how to pull fish and seal out from underneath the ice. So it seems that the thing that's going to lead to the complete extinction of humans is a genuine planet-wide extinction event, like we've experienced 5 times in the past. And the scary one that for me actually is not the Permian, it's the PETM, because it seems to have the more parallels to what is happening to us right now. You want to talk about that and how these things might play out?
Well, yeah. For example, an ice-free Arctic, which I indicated was projected to occur in 2016, plus or minus 3 years, would almost certainly cause at least a 5.5 degrees Celsius global average temperature rise within a matter of months or years, a relatively short period of time. And a paper by Strona and Bradshaw, which came out in Scientific Reports on November 13th of 2018, indicates that a 5 or 6 degree Celsius global average temperature rise would be sufficient to cause the loss of all life on Earth.
Yeah, or the vast majority
of
life
on Earth.
Yeah.
And that was actually their conclusion. And then they went on in the same paper. I've never seen this in a peer-reviewed journal article before. They went on in the same paper to write that although we conclude this will cause the loss of all life on Earth, we really can't imagine that happening. And so they were backpedaling even as they were writing their own scientific paper.
I would say anybody who's publishing a scientific paper that says all life on Earth, I mean, even the Permian, it was 97% of all life. You got bacteria that survive. That's just not scientifically defensible. So their credibility, I would say, is in question.
So they backed off, and I suspect that's why they did it, even though the results indicated loss of all life on Earth. And it's all about the rate of change here, the rate of environmental change.
So is the thing that's driving this, I'm sorry to be moving this along, but we've got just a few minutes here, is the thing that's driving this, in your opinion, the blue ice of, the blue ocean event in the Arctic, that is the loss of albedo, no more reflectivity of ice and snow, instead we're absorbing heat? Or is it the release of methane from the permafrost that's melting and possibly the clathrates?
It's any and all of the above. There's hydrates or clathrates from beneath the relatively shallow seabed of the Arctic Ocean. There's also terrestrial permafrost, measured recently in Russia as more than 8,500 parts per million, not parts per billion, which is how methane is generally measured in the atmosphere. And so that's an enormous release, at least from a local area.
Right, 1 part per million is 1,000 parts per billion.
Right.
So we've added 3 zeros to the numbers that we're measuring.
So this is roughly 8,500 million parts per billion. That's a lot of methanes coming, and that's the terrestrial permafrost. And then we also obviously need to be concerned about the former permafrost now under the Arctic Ocean, and loss of global dimming, for example, is another severe existential threat, and on the list goes.
Right. You and I have talked about this before in this venue and others, and you're of the opinion that, or I believe you're of the opinion, that basically there's nothing more we can do.
Well, because of the rapid changes and because of what's come to be known as the McPherson paradox, named by my friend Bill Eddy, if we keep heating the planet, it'll take us beyond the ability to survive. If we stop heating the planet by reducing, never mind making it go away, but reducing industrial activity by as little as 35%, that will cause a spike in temperature well beyond the temperature at which humans have appeared on the planet.
Because we're cutting down on air pollution?
Yes, because of global dimming or the aerosol masking effect, which was supported by a February 8th, 2019 paper that just this year in Science, of all places, indicating that we have ignored the aerosol masking effect to great detriment in terms of understanding climate change. This paper by Rosenfeld and colleagues.
Have you ever looked at the research that was done around right after 9/11 when we had 3 days with no airplanes, and that's a minimal amount of reflectivity. I mean, the total airplane activity around the world has to represent less. It's got to be a fraction of 1% of the surface area of the 30,000-foot atmosphere.
Absolutely. That was a contrail effect. It was a little bit different than the aerosol masking effect, but still it indicates how sensitive the climate is on Earth. And this is something that paper after paper shows within the last 10 years. They just keep reeling out and indicating that the planet is far more sensitive than we ever imagined in terms of climate change.
So if there's nothing more to do, should we just all go out and have a steak dinner and buy an SUV and drive across the country in a 6,000-pound diesel?
Yeah, that's not my approach, but I suspect some people are using my message to conclude that, yes. As I've been saying for more than 10 years now in public, I think that we need to take right action and not be attached to the outcome. Yeah. So those are both Buddhist
a very Zen approach to it.
Right. And I'm not Buddhist, but I still think those are good ideas.
I get it. Guy McPherson, the book is Only Love Remains, and the website is GuyMcPherson, McPherson.com. Guy, thanks for dropping by.
Thank you, Tom.
Great
Pleasure.
to see you. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And we'll be back with your calls on Anything Goes Friday in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Thank you, Guy.
Thank you.
And welcome back. Jesse in Miami, Florida, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Jesse, what's on your mind today? Jesse? I'm not hearing Jesse. That's strange. Normally I do. Michael in Snohomish, Washington. Michael, can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning, Tom.
Hey, and I can hear you. What's on your mind today?
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago on Anything Goes Friday, I asked if someone who was pardoned by Trump, if they would have to testify, could they be compelled to testify before Congress, seeing that they were pardoned and no longer faced a jeopardy?
Right.
And you seem to think it was an interesting question, but you didn't have an answer.
And I still don't, Michael. And but in the next hour, and I'll make a rare exception to our one call a week rule here. If you want to call back in the next hour, Congressman Ro Khanna is going to be with us. And he is a Yale Law School graduate. He knows the law, and he knows constitutional law. As I was writing my book about the Supreme Court, I was bouncing questions off him. So if anybody would know the answer to that question, it would probably be him. So you want to call back in the next hour and ask him?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. And
thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. Robbie in Portland, listening on X-Ray FM. Hey, Robbie, what's on your mind today?
Well, first and foremost, it's the climate stuff. I just wanted to let your listeners know that we should start calling it a global weirding. There's the Beijing Weather Modification Office. China came out to its citizens and basically said that they can control the weather, which is why they're a world power. Our government still wants us to fight whether or not we can even influence. Just wanted to get that out. But last week, I brought up the election interference with Russia. And what I brought up was I'm actually more concerned about the DNC interfering with the election. If you look at the primaries, like the Iowa coin toss that happened in their caucuses, the Arizona election where people basically had their political party affiliations changed without them knowing, all the voter purging. You switched it onto the Republicans, but I'm actually more concerned about the DNC because didn't the DNC collaborate with the mass media to shunt Bernie? Isn't that election interference?
Well, I'm not sure that I guarantee you the DNC is not collaborating with the mass media right now to screw Bernie. It may well have happened 4 years ago. I don't disagree with that, Robbie. But I think that the larger issue right now is what the media. Thanks a lot, Robbie. Is what the media is doing. And what the media is doing right now is bizarre. I mean, this morning in the Washington Post, front page story, Bernie Sanders went to Moscow for his honeymoon. Didn't we already visit this? And then this morning on MSNBC, several shows in a row, the sales pitch was back in 2005, Bernie Sanders voted for a bill that made it harder for victims of gun violence to sue, and which is a pretty terrible thing, right? But there was no mention of another high-profile candidate in 2005 who actually authored legislation to make it illegal for young people to discharge their student debts through bankruptcy. It seems to me that there is a concerted effort happening right now in the media. Literally today, you can see it, to take down Bernie. And, that's we saw this 4 years ago. We're seeing it again. And I'm guessing that, if Bernie goes down, they will simply move their sights to Elizabeth Warren next. They're just going to keep taking down progressives, in my opinion, until all that's left are people who are willing to get in bed with giant corporations. We'll be back. It's 22 minutes and a half past the hour. Stick around. We'll be back with your calls on Anything Goes Friday. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, 23 minutes past the hour. Jesse, it's Anything Goes Friday. Jesse in Miami, Florida. Hey, Jesse, what's on your mind today?
Hey, yeah, hi, Tom. Hey, Miss Pearlson talking about the climate change.
Yeah, Guy McPherson.
You could put him in a time machine and send him back 100 years, and it would have been the same thing he would have said then. You would think we learned something in 100 years. I challenge his statement to, it's tough, but we got to do it. He got to challenge capitalism. If nobody challenged capitalism, the poles is going to keep melting.
Yeah. Well, the poles are going to keep melting pretty much no matter what now, Jesse. I think we've passed a number of tipping points that we can't go back from. The question is, will we be able to rapidly adapt to this new world? Can we adapt as quickly as the weather is changing? And in my opinion, the answer to that question is unknown. Guys apparently strongly of the opinion that the answer is no. Sorry.
I disagree with you.
Yeah.
If we know what the problem is our greed, Bernie said challenge Wall Street with it, but he wouldn't challenge the system itself.
Yeah.
And he just put it on like, we born with greed, we got to die with greed. We're not born with greed. We taught greed just like we taught racism.
I agree.
If we don't challenge the lie that it is, we're gonna live it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. And, step by step. Paul, thank you, Jesse. Paul in Lucerne, California. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I tell you, I'm really afraid about methane gas. And methane gas, let me get outside. Methane gas is the component in the air that keeps oxygen from getting above 24.6%.
No, not true, Paul. Methane doesn't compete with oxygen for space in the atmosphere. Our atmosphere is about
in the air.
No, our atmosphere is about 20% oxygen, and it's like 0.00001% methane. The methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. That's where methane is dangerous to us. It's not dangerous to us in that it is displacing oxygen.
Our mammals can't live.
I'm sorry?
Oxygen has to be above 22.4%. Our mammals will not be able to live.
Cool.
And if oxygen goes above 24.6%, you cannot put out a land fire.
Okay.
Okay.
But methane's not influencing either one of those variables.
No, methane, I learned this when I was in college, and I have the book on back order right now. Methane actually consumes oxygen in the air, according to, I forget his first name was Joseph, and I don't remember his last name.
Yeah.
But there's a book, The Gaia Theory, and that explains it too.
Well, methane breaks down when methane is oxidized essentially in the atmosphere, or when it breaks down in the atmosphere. it breaks down into carbon dioxide and water vapor. It's methane is I'm not remembering I think it's CH4, right? One carbon, 4 hydrogens. So yeah, as it's being oxidized, it would convert free oxygen, or actually oxygen ions. It would convert that into water vapor, and so it would consume oxygen. Yeah, but again, the methane is 0.000 something. The danger. No, I get it, Paul. Thank you. The danger of methane is that it is a radically more effective greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. That's the danger of methane. We'll be back. It's 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I think it's call up and argue with Tom Day, which is fine with me. Anything goes. Friday, 27 minutes past the hour. We're reading from the Mueller report. This is from Section 1, Part 1, and page 11. And this is from the part titled The Special Counsel's Investigation, which is describing the scope of it. The special counsel, the order stated, is authorized to conduct the investigation confirmed by then FBI Director James B. Comey in testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on March 20th, 2017, including 1. Any links and or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump, and 2, any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, and 3, any other matters within the scope of 28 CFR 600.4. Appointment order. Section 600.4 affords the special counsel, quote, the authority to investigate and prosecute federal crimes committed in the course of and with the intent to interfere with the special counsel's investigation, such as perjury, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and intimidation of witnesses. End of quote. The authority to investigate, quote, any matters that arose during the investigation, end quote, appointment order B2, covers similar crimes that may have occurred during the course of the FBI's confirmed investigation before the special counsel's appointment. Quote, if the special counsel believes it is necessary and appropriate, the order further provided, the special counsel is authorized to prosecute federal crimes arising from the investigation of these matters. Finally, the acting attorney general made applicable sections 600.4 through 600.10 of Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The acting attorney general further clarified the scope of the special counsel's investigatory authority in 2 subsequent memoranda. A memorandum dated August 2nd, 2017, explained that the appointment order had been, quote, worded categorically in order to permit its public release without confirming specific investigations involving specific individuals, end quote. It then confirmed that the special counsel has been authorized since his appointment to investigate allegations that 3 Trump campaign officials, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, and George Papadopoulos, quote, committed a crime or crimes by colluding with Russian government officials with respect to the Russian government's efforts to interfere with the 2016 presidential campaign, or election, end quote. The memorandum also confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate certain other matters, including 2 additional sets of allegations involving Manafort, parenthesis, crimes arising from payments he received from the Ukrainian government, and crimes arising from his receipt of loans from a bank whose CEO was then seeking a position in the Trump administration, close parenthesis. Allegations that Papadopoulos committed a crime or crimes by acting as an unregistered agent of the Israeli government, and 4 sets of allegations involving Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to President Trump. On October 20th, 2017, the acting attorney general confirmed in a memorandum the special counsel's investigative authority as to several individuals and entities. First, quote, as part of a full and thorough investigation of the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, the special counsel was authorized to investigate, quote, the pertinent activities of Michael Cohen, Richard Gates, redacted, Roger Stone, and redacted. Confirmation, quote, confirmation of the authorization to investigate such individuals, close quote, the memorandum stressed, oh, quote, does not suggest that the special counsel has made a determination that any of them has committed a crime, end quote. Second, with respect to Michael Cohen, the memorandum recognized the special counsel's authority to investigate, quote, leads related to Cohen's establishment and use of Essential Consultants LLC to, inter alia, receive funds from Russian-backed entities, end quote. Third, the memorandum memorialized the special counsel's authority to investigate individuals and entities who were possibly engaged in jointly undertaken activity with existing subjects of the investigation, including Paul Manafort. Finally, the memorandum described an FBI investigation opened before the special counsel's appointment into allegations that then Attorney General Jeff Sessions made false statements to the United States Senate and confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate that matter. The special counsel structured the investigation in view of his power and authority to, quote, exercise all investigative and prosecutorial functions of any United States attorney, end quote. Like a U.S. Attorney's office, the special counsel's office considered a range of classified and unclassified information available to the FBI in the course of the office's Russia investigation. And the office structured that work around evidence for possible use in prosecutions of federal crimes, assuming that one or more crimes was identified that warranted prosecution. There was substantial evidence immediately available to the special counsel at the inception of the investigation in May 2017 because the FBI had, by that time, already investigated Russian election interference for nearly 10 months. The special counsel's office exercised its judgment regarding what to investigate and did not, for instance, investigate every public report of a contact between the Trump campaign and Russian-affiliated individuals and entities. The office has included its investigation into links and coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Certain proceedings associated with the office's work remain ongoing. After consultation with the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, the office has transferred responsibility for those remaining issues to other components of the Department of Justice and the FBI. Appendix D lists those transfers. I would add 12 of the 14 are redacted. So this is reading from the Mueller Report, Part 1, Section 1.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It is Anything Goes Friday. Marty in Evergreen Park, Illinois. Hey, Marty, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I just wanted to preface this by saying one of my favorite papers I wrote in college was the positive feedback, the two most dangerous words in the English language.
Right.
Basically, assuming that the Earth can exports more carbon than it can take in. But that being said, one of the things that concerns me is that, tardigrades can live on the harshest environments on Earth and in outer space and still survive. So my thinking is that if the weather doesn't kill us, superbugs will. And, they're already evolving to be resistant to all the forms of, antibiotics that we have in place right now, which is part of the reason why I don't eat meat at all, because I don't want to, aid that process.
Right.
I haven't for like 20 years. But I'm thinking that, if the weather doesn't kill us, superbugs will. What are your thoughts?
I think the superbugs are a challenge. We had the author years ago of that book on Lori Garrett was her name. Yeah, Lori Garrett wrote a book about basically, that's that kind of a scenario. And I don't think it's going to kill us. I think that we're increasingly facing serious challenges. We now have fungi, this strain of Candida now that has mutated to the point where it resists all antifungals, and it's starting to kill people systemically. We have bacteria that are, in fact, some of the venereal diseases are now multi-drug resistant, and tuberculosis as well. There's a form of multi-drug resistant TB. So we may well be back, at some point fairly soon, back to where we were 150 years ago before antibiotics. Some epidemiologists might even argue that would be a good thing, because we're just continually, our massive use of antibiotics is just continually breeding new strains of superbugs. But and you know, they're evolving faster than we do because they go through 1,000 lifespans in an hour, and we go through 1,000 lifespans in 100,000 years. And so you know, this is a challenge. It's a very, very real challenge. But you know, humans also do mutate. I mean, the Black Plague wiped out a third of us in Europe, and at least a third of the people living in Europe, and some of those people developed an adaptation, a mutation that made them resistant to the Black Plague. Turns out it also made them resistant to HIV. They can't get HIV, or they can't get AIDS if they're infected with HIV. So, you know, the absolute human extinction, I think, really is more likely to be associated with a massive climate event that kills off all life, or the majority of life on Earth, rather than superbugs. But you know, Marty, spot on. It's a big issue, and Lori Garrett and people like her who are talking about. There's actually another book came out last year, you know, with a similar postulate that you know, we need to be very concerned about this. We need to do something about it. Marty, thanks for the call. Michelle, in Mundelein, Illinois. Do I have that right?
It's Michael.
Oh, Michael. I'm sorry.
That's okay. On Tuesday, you were talking about hedge fund compensation, and I think the segue was in your theme about CEO compensation being so excessive. Mm-hmm. One thing you brought up two particular hedge funds, and you said that the heads of them were essentially bankers. I want to make a distinction here because I'm a mathematician, but I've also worked in capital markets and in hedge funds. Large Wall Street banks have up to 4 different parts. There's a trading and sales, which is pretty mundane. It's, you know, incentive stock options that a company wants are generated there. There's proprietary positioning, where they take a view and manage their own capital. There may be commercial or retail, and you think, you know, your corner branch where you can get a car loan. And then there's investment banking, which is mergers and acquisitions, advising, issuance, and all those special client relations. That's where the banksters live.
Right. That's where the big money is.
That's where the big money is. And hedge funds don't have that component. They are purely proprietary positioning. Mm-hmm. And they make their money off of a fee structure, which is a basic expense based on capital, and then there's a performance component as well. Now, I draw this distinction with these funds because, first of all, unlike some of the other examples like big pharma or healthcare, where the CEOs get tremendous compensation, those companies are basically milking their clients, their customers. Someone needs a drug, they have to buy it, and right. So there's nothing there. With hedge funds, it's elective. High net worth individuals say, I want to get this sort of return, and so they invest in that.
Sure. No, I get that, and I wasn't trying to suggest that hedge fund managers who are making $2 billion a year are necessarily ripping off their clients. Their clients, you know, by and large, are going into that with their eyes open. And in order to make $2 billion a year, you probably have to produce, you know, revenues of $100 billion a year for somebody. My question was, what does it do to a democratic society? And really, that should be split in half. What does it do to a democracy, and what does it do to a society to have anybody in that society making $2 billion a year? And that's why I went off on that rant about taxes. You know, that this all came about in large part after Reagan dropped the top tax rate below 50%, because during that period from the 1930s to the 1980s, of incredible growth and prosperity in the United States, and principally growth and prosperity among the working class. The working class, their asset structure and their income was rising faster than it was for the top 1% or even the top 10%. During that period of time, from 1930 to 1980. And after 1980, their growth not only stalled out, it actually went backwards. You know, your average income now in the United States, individual income, is around $30,000 a year, which is, you know, pretty tough to live on, and in most cities. And but compensation at the top end, the top 10% has gone up by, substantially. As I recall, it's around 100% during that time period. And the top 1% or the top 1/100th of 1% have just exploded. I think the top 1/100th is like something like 900% increase. And this is all the result of tax policy. And so my point was we need to go back to a tax policy that discourages people from trying to take that amount of money, or if they do, that simply goes into the federal government and funds food stamps. So that was my point. But Michael, thank you. Your distinctions are important. Rebecca in Seattle. Hey, Rebecca, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Happy Friday. Hope
Thank you.
everything's
Back
good
at
with you. Yeah, so since it's Anything Goes Friday, I am curious on your thoughts of this idea that's been brewing in my brain basically since Occupy and then when the Bernie campaign happened. And it's based in the question of how do we fix all of these problems that are happening in our government and our environment? Like, what is an effective solution or strategy that we can actually implement? Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of a large idea. I'm going to ask to kind of premise it with a notion of looking at Western medicine versus holistic medicine. So you're familiar with the difference,
sure.
Western modern medicine versus natural remedies, other holistic applications and such.
Right.
So if we look at our current government as Western medicine, there's still a lot of value in what they're doing. But there's some things that holistic medicine can do better, more effectively, easier. So what I'm looking at is it's kind of a big idea, but I feel like it could.
Well, let's get right to it, Rebecca.
Sure, absolutely. I feel like we almost, at this point, need to pull together as many of the grassroots organizations, movements across the nation, and create kind of a parallel system of sorts to address the real issues, needs, and concerns, so we can catalyze our power and circumvent kind of the traditional paths to get to those solutions for change. In almost like a very established and organized way.
Here's the problem you're going to face, Rebecca. And I've been through this. As soon as you say to a bunch of different groups who each have their own subcultures, who each have their own internal hierarchies, who each have their own funding base, who each have their own priorities for the world, as soon as you say, we're all going to get together and join up and become one super organization, the first question everybody asks is going to be, who's in charge? What happens to my interests? And at that point, everything just, fails, basically.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. So, however, if we look at our current U.S. government, everybody has their own interests and conflicting desires towards who's leading the conversation and such. Based in my history of, living in cooperative housing situations, as well as, dealing in different organizations, when people are solution-driven, they're really focused on making things happen, there are ways to work out those issues. I'm agreeing, but
yeah, no, I get that, but you first got to get people to agree to join the structure, and also, Adolf Hitler's sales pitch was 1,000 years of peace for the entire world. How do we get to 1,000 years of peace? So, a new millennium, right? How do we get to 1,000 years of peace for the entire world? Put me in charge of the entire world. I'll give you 1,000 years of peace. That was his sales pitch. There is, I think, something actually very healthy about there being, 1,000 different organizations that are working on climate change and the environment, 1,000 different or 100 different organizations of any consequence that are working on things like, animal rights or dietary stuff. 100 different organizations that are, trying to strengthen Social Security and build a stronger social safety net. I think there's a lot to be said for diversity and a lot of small-scale structures.
I agree, and I'm not diminishing the value of everybody doing their part on their own. Another thing that I take into consideration is if stuff hits the fan in our actual structures that be, how are we going to pull together? We don't kind of have like a consistent connection there. We don't have like one.
Well, the largest structure we have, Rebecca, are the political parties.
Right, but they're kind of failing us in a lot of ways.
I agree, and that's why I keep telling everybody to get inside them and take them over, particularly the Democratic Party. But I get your point, and I can't disagree with it. I think more coordination would be a really good thing. Maybe and if you're looking at an Uber organization, a larger organization that can help make other people more effective, it should be one that facilitates or supports rather than directs and controls. It's a good idea. Rebecca, thank you for the call. We'll be back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program, 46 minutes past the hour. Back with your calls after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And just a reminder that at the top of the hour, or in the next hour, Congressman Ro Khanna will be with us for a full hour taking your calls. He's the vice chair of the Progressive Caucus. And welcome back, Tim in Beaverton, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, thanks for taking my call, Tom. I've developed a very simple solution to our beginning work on real effective climate change, and that's just go to the simple local, state, and federal government and take every Republican out of office. Simple as that.
By the electoral process, yeah.
Yeah, it's simple. It's literally as simple as that, because any effective legislation that tends to come through, who blocks it?
Well,
both on the
it
local
depends,
and state,
but
federal level.
Yeah, this is why the Koch brothers, created ALEC, which operates exclusively at the state level, and why they've also created another new organization. It's been some while since we've talked about it. The name of it's not right on the tip of my tongue, but they created another organization that is, helping get Republicans elected, right-wing Republicans, libertarian Republicans get elected at the state level, at the county level, and even at the town level all over the country. So they've got their fingers in everybody's elections now.
Exactly. I mean, you look at, Herman Adelson, Rupert Murdoch, the Mercers. You literally have a handful of billionaires who are in their 70s and 80s that are in control of your granddaughter's life.
Yeah, my grandsons, yeah. Yeah, Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and it's a damn scary thing, I think you're absolutely right, Tim.
We effectively have to get the millennials out to vote.
Yeah,
simple as that.
Yeah, and by the way, everybody else too. I mean, the age group that mostly doesn't show up to vote is those people in their 30s, 40s, and early 50s. After mid-50s and before the 30s, you've got younger people and boomers who are fairly active politically, but that group that's just working their butts off to raise their kids and keep their families together and pay for the mortgage and all that kind of thing, they're the ones that tend not to vote. It's just low on their priority list for all the demands on their time, and that's real unfortunate.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Tim, thanks for the call. I think you're spot on. Catherine in Burlington, Vermont. Hey, Catherine, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to see if you would want to talk about Andrew Yang 2020.
Yeah, we talked with Andrew about Andrew Yang about a month ago. He was on this program.
Me?
No, Andrew was on this program.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Yeah, the YouTube. You can find the YouTube over at our YouTube page.
I'll look it up online.
Yeah, no, he's a good guy. And he has now passed. He has now gone through that 65,000 donor threshold. So he's going to be on the stage. He's going to be one of the people debating in the Democratic debates, which I think is just the greatest thing, going.
About his economic plan, the GDP?
Yeah, his universal basic income. I mean, he has basically no chance of becoming president, in my opinion. And because of that, you could argue that he shouldn't be on the Democratic stage. I could argue either side of that one. But I think that his ideas have a huge potential, not necessarily to so much influence this Democratic cycle, but keep in mind it was 4 years ago that Bernie Sanders was doing this, yelling about talking about, the Medicare for all, and now Medicare for all is being embraced by about a third of the Democratic candidates, and another third of them are embracing, public option for all, which I think will lead us to Medicare for all, although it leaves a lot of, grody things intact, but. Anyhow, Catherine, Spot on. Thank you for the call. And Andrew Yang, I'm looking forward to hearing his opinion on that debate. Like I said, you can see the YouTube of my talking with him online. You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, all you have to do is go over to ThomHartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Well, welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday. Charles in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind? Charles? Listening to 1350. We got people who are not listening to their phones this morning. Katie in Hamul, California. Hey, Katie, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I have a quick question, so I'm just going to say a little something. I'm really glad that you had Guy McPherson on. I'm about your age, and my mother said to her 3 daughters don't have children. I have talked to you about this before because she read Rachel Carson and The Population, Bob Paul Ehrlich, and it's not going well. She knew people, and now I'm the only one that did, and I'm saying the same thing to my kids. So thank you for having him on. What I want to ask you simply is this. By the way, I love my Patreon membership. Everybody should join.
Thank you.
I turned on the radio this morning, and once again, the lead story is the economy is doing wonderfully.
Right.
And I'm thinking, I've been hearing this, and I'm thinking, I just got back from 3 months in Australia, which is another kind of interesting call because it's their election time, but that's for another time. And, I've been wanting to call you. I can't from there. And it's like, what can you just explain? Sorry to your listeners that maybe have heard this a lot, but
Sure.
Why is the economy doing so well? Nothing has been put in place by this administration to create jobs.
Right.
That's it.
The economy is doing well right now. I mean, the economy was doing well because there was this massive stimulus coming out of the Bush crash of pouring $24 trillion. The Fed poured $24 trillion into the pockets of banks, banksters, billionaires, and many of them not even American. I mean, we bailed out Deutsche Bank, among others, and we also bailed out GM, and we basically put America. Obama basically put America back on the road, but he didn't deal with the monopoly problem, and he didn't deal with the big bank problem. And so what is happening right now, and there's a real interesting analysis of this in Axios Markets this morning, or maybe it was yesterday morning, is that the stocks are rising, which is the principal thing that causes people to think the economy is good, not because companies are producing more goods, not because companies are paying their employees more money, not because companies are opening new markets, not because companies are reinvesting, but because companies are using the money that they got from the tax cut and from their profits to buy back their own shares. So if a company is worth $1 million and they've got 1 million shares out there and each share is $1, and they buy back 250,000 shares, out of the marketplace, they now have only 750,000 shares, but the company's still worth $1 million, so each share becomes worth, $1.30 or something like that instead of just $1. So when companies buy back their shares, their stock price goes up because the number of shares has decreased, even though the company hasn't done a damn thing to help the economy. And as companies, and the reason that they buy back their shares is because their senior executives are compensated with stock. This was a change in the law, the tax law, that was made in the 1980s by the Reagan administration and by Republicans in Congress. And a lot of Democrats went along with it, by the way, just to acknowledge that. And so what you have right now is basically financialization of the economy, that even individual companies are no longer paying attention to building assembly lines or building new products or even R&D. Instead, they're just looking at ways to jack their stock price so that their senior executives and even their average workers, if they have a stock plan for them, will make more money from their stock. And it's a Ponzi scheme, and it will crash. In fact, the amount of money going into the stock market, the other big point that I saw in another investment newsletter yesterday was that more money in the stock market is going out from these big exchange-traded funds like DOW, like the Dow. You know, you can buy the entire Dow, right, from buying the billions have been going out of these funds for the last 6 months rather than into them. And you look at that in a vacuum and you say, well, why are stock prices going up? Because they should be going down right now, according to that measure. People are not buying stocks, they're actually selling stocks. So why is the price of stocks going up? It's going up because companies are buying their own shares and retiring them in order to jack their executives' pay. So this is not going to last, Katie. The Trump administration is betting they can make it last to November 2020. And they may be right, but there's going to be hell to pay. Katie, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. We're reading from the Mueller report. This is from Section 1, Part 1, and page 11. And this is from the part titled The Special Counsel's Investigation, which is describing the scope of it. The special counsel, the order stated, is authorized to conduct the investigation confirmed by then FBI Director James B. Comey in testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on March 20th, 2017, including 1, any links and or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump, and 2, any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, and 3, any other matters within the scope of 28 CFR 600.4. Appointment order. Section 600.4 affords the special counsel, quote, the authority to investigate and prosecute federal crimes committed in the course of and with the intent to interfere with the special counsel's investigation, such as perjury, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and intimidation of witnesses. end of quote. The authority to investigate, quote, any matters that arose during the investigation, end quote, Appointment Order B2, covers similar crimes that may have occurred during the course of the FBI's confirmed investigation before the special counsel's appointment. Quote, if the special counsel believes it is necessary and appropriate, the order further provided, the special counsel is authorized to prosecute federal crimes arising from the investigation of these matters. Finally, the acting attorney general made applicable sections 600.4 through 600.10 of Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The acting attorney general further clarified the scope of the special counsel's investigatory authority in two subsequent memoranda. A memorandum dated August 2nd, 2017, explained that the appointment order had been, quote, worded categorically in order to permit its public release without confirming specific investigations involving specific individuals, end quote. It then confirmed that the special counsel has been authorized since his appointment to investigate allegations that 3 Trump campaign officials, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, and George Papadopoulos, quote, committed a crime or crimes by colluding with Russian government officials with respect to the Russian government's efforts to interfere with the 2016 presidential campaign, or election, end quote. The memorandum also confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate certain other matters, including 2 additional sets of allegations involving Manafort, parenthesis, crimes arising from payments he received from the Ukrainian government, and crimes arising from his receipt of loans from a bank whose CEO was then seeking a position in the Trump administration, close parenthesis. Allegations that Papadopoulos committed a crime or crimes by acting as an unregistered agent of the Israeli government, and 4 sets of allegations involving Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to President Trump. On October 20th, 2017, the acting attorney general confirmed in a memorandum the special counsel's investigative authority as to several individuals and entities. First, quote, as part of a full and thorough investigation of the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, the special counsel was authorized to investigate, quote, the pertinent activities of Michael Cohen, Richard Gates, redacted, Roger Stone, and redacted. Confirmation, quote, confirmation of the authorization to investigate such individuals, close quote, the memorandum stressed, oh, quote, does not suggest that the special counsel has made a determination that any of them has committed a crime, end quote. Second, with respect to Michael Cohen, the memorandum recognized the special counsel's authority to investigate, quote, leads related to Cohen's establishment and use of Essential Consultants LLC to, inter alia, receive funds from Russian-backed entities, end quote. Third, the memorandum memorialized the special counsel's authority to investigate individuals and entities who were possibly engaged in jointly undertaken activity with existing subjects of the investigation, including Paul Manafort. Finally, the memorandum described an FBI investigation opened before the special counsel's appointment into allegations that then Attorney General Jeff Sessions made false statements to the United States Senate and confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate that matter. The special counsel structured the investigation in view of his power and authority to, quote, exercise all investigative and prosecutorial functions of any United States attorney, end quote. Like a U.S. attorney's office, the special counsel's office considered a range of classified and unclassified information available to the FBI in the course of the office's Russia investigation. And the office structured that work around evidence for possible use in prosecutions of federal crimes, assuming that one or more crimes was identified that warranted prosecution. There was substantial evidence immediately available to the special counsel at the inception of the investigation in May 2017 because the FBI had, by that time, already investigated Russian election interference for nearly 10 months. The special counsel's office exercised its judgment regarding what to investigate and did not, for instance, investigate every public report of a contact between the Trump campaign and Russian-affiliated individuals and entities. The office has included its investigation into links and coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Certain proceedings associated with the office's work remain ongoing. After consultation with the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, the office has transferred responsibility for those remaining issues to other components of the Department of Justice and the FBI. Appendix D lists those transfers. I would add 12 of the 14 are redacted. So this is reading from the Mueller Report, Part 1, Section 1.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's a full hour. Congressman Ro Khanna is going to be here with us, or is here with us, rather, taking your calls for the hour. He represents the 17th District of California. He's the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. His website is Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Ro, R-O, Khanna, KHANNA. Congressman, welcome back.
Great to be back on.
Great having you with us. You are an attorney. In fact, you're a graduate of the Yale Law School, which seems to be in vogue these days, and a very knowledgeable guy. I'm curious your take on William Barr as our Attorney General and the whole, all the legal stuff around what's going on with, defiance of Congress and all these things. I mean, what do you think is happening here?
Well, as I was telling someone the other day, if Barr was a law student, he would be kicked out for that type of fraud. And if he was practicing law, there would be a disbarment action for his misrepresentation. I mean, it's really appalling. He blatantly misrepresented Mueller's report to Congress and to the American people. And his excuse just doesn't add up. I mean, he went and told Congress, well, Mueller's real concern wasn't with my summary. Mueller's real concern was with the press's reporting. And then 15 minutes later, Barr is saying, no, actually, Mueller was upset at me and my reporting and sent me this snitty letter. And if he really had a concern, he should have just called me up. So he's contradicting himself at the Senate testimony itself. My view is he's committed perjury multiple times. He's really debased the office of the Attorney General, and he should resign. Now, he has to cooperate with Congress. It's unprecedented that a cabinet secretary wouldn't testify before the committee of jurisdiction, and ultimately the courts can force him to testify, and I expect they will.
Good. Do you think he should be impeached?
I do. If he doesn't go through with the process, I mean, I think anyone should resign with any honor. But otherwise, the law enforcement should look at issues of perjury and other obstacles that he has thrown in the way of the investigation, and the Judiciary Committee should begin an investigation on that.
Yeah, strong stuff. Okay, Congressman, the board is full. Let's pick up some phone calls here. Michael in Snohomish, Washington. You have a question for Congressman Khanna.
Yes, Congressman. If Trump were to pardon? Oh, if Trump were to pardon one of his co-conspirators, could said co-conspirator be compelled to then testify before Congress since jeopardy no longer applies?
If he were to pardon someone, you're saying, well, first of all, there's a huge debate whether you can use a pardon for corrupt or illegal purposes. I mean, for example, if someone blatantly commits murder and is contributing to a president's campaign, the president under the law, it's ambiguous whether the president can pardon someone if there's a corrupt intent or an intent to cover up. And my view would be that in that case, the president's pardon would be for clearly a corrupt purpose. Now, look, people have abused the pardon powers before. Bush Sr. pardoned 6 people to prevent the Iran-Contra investigation. So courts have unfortunately deferred too much to presidential pardon power. But I do think in this case it may be seen as so blatant in subverting an investigation that the courts may rule that this is really a pardon of corrupt intent.
But even if, to Michael's point, if the main reason why somebody can invoke their Fifth Amendment rights It's because they have Fifth Amendment rights. They have a right against self-incrimination because they may be prosecuted. If they have been pardoned in the sweeping way that Jerry Ford pardoned the people involved with the Nixon, or at least Nixon, and that George Herbert Walker Bush pardoned Elliott Abrams and these guys basically for crimes that they've been convicted of, as well as crimes that had not yet come to the surface. Under those circumstances, doesn't that person already have a waiver of immunity so they can no longer say, I refuse to testify before Congress based on my Fifth Amendment rights because it may incriminate me, when whatever they say can't criminally incriminate them?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, that is true. But if they have a broad-level pardon, they may not care if Congress holds them in contempt, and they may not think there's any other consequence. So they may not use the Fifth Amendment protection, but they may just say, okay, go hold me in contempt, and what are you going to do about it?
Right, and I'll get just pardoned again for that one or something like that. Yeah. Okay, Michael, thank you for that call. Joe in Cupertino, California, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna, who I think represents you.
Congressman Tom, wait a minute. First, I wanted to say thank you so much for reading the Mueller report. I got more information than the Attorney General.
You're welcome. We're reading that every day. Yep.
Yes, I appreciate that. I hope you read the whole thing out loud, by the way.
Oh, that's my plan, and it's all going up on YouTube, and then we're going to jam it all together to have one giant read. It'll take a few months.
You sure are great.
But to your question for Representative Khanna.
Okay. Congressman, I'm sorry. I missed you at your town hall, but unfortunately we're celebrating a terrible incident that occurred just like down in San Diego here in our home district of Sunnyvale with this gentleman who apparently returned from Iraq and took out 8 people in an intersection, assuming that they were of, Muslim descent. And it turns out that he suffers from PTSD. And yesterday I watched Senator Sanders passionately try to lead Congress in the right direction about getting us out of these endless wars. But I think that this gentleman, Mr. Peoples, is a victim of, being at war for almost 20 years. And if we don't do something about that right now, regardless of what Trump's doing, but if we don't do something to prevent Venezuela from being the next Vietnam and whatever, I think we're going to see a lot more of this. I just wonder if we can reinstill the passion that you brought to bring us to the floor again, because we can't let this go. 140,000 children are expected to die in Yemen, and we're talking about legal wranglings. And my passion here is with you. We need to continue this fight. What do you say?
Well, Joe, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your bringing up Venezuela and Yemen. In fact, I had just tweeted out to Senator Lindsey Graham, who said that the United States needs to send aircrafts over to Venezuela, that I'd welcome a debate with him on any network about the downfall of interventionism as opposed to having a foreign policy of restraint and human rights. I had written an op-ed a few months ago now in the Washington Post warning that our intervention was going to lead, unfortunately, to the very situation that we have now. I mean, there was such naivete when Pence called up Guaido and tried to anoint him the leader of Venezuela. And, it reminds you of Napoleon's famous saying, it's worse than a crime, it's a blunder. Here there was this sense of the administration that suddenly the military was all going to leave Maduro and go to Guaido, and there would be this magical, peaceful transition of power. And anyone who has paid any attention to Venezuela knows that that was an absurd expectation. I mean, you have the irony of Bolton going out a few days ago and doing a press conference saying all these people are going to desert, and then 2-3 days later you see they're not deserting. And what many of us have been warning about is we're just going to be inciting a civil war. There are 1.6 million people in Venezuela who have private arms. Maduro has inherited a large part of Hugo Chavez's base, and whatever you think of his politics, he's not insignificant in his political support. And the only way forward is a negotiated settlement that the Pope or Mexico or Uruguay have called for. For us to be meddling and getting entrenched in yet another civil war is not just morally suspect, it's actually not in our self-interest, and we need to continue to speak out about that. Unfortunately, we were unable to overturn the president's veto on the Yemen War Powers Resolution. The Saudis continue their brutal blockade of Yemen, and every day children are dying because food and medicine isn't getting into them.
Congressman, why do you think it is that we've got between 50 and 60 countries? Germany has pulled out of this coalition, but a lot of them are major Democratic allies, small d Democratic allies, who are saying, yeah, Juan Guaido, the guy who's the Speaker of the House, who never even ran for president of Venezuela, is the president of Venezuela. What's going on?
Well, they
Is
haven't
this the
learned
oil?
their lesson. They haven't learned their lesson that interventionism often makes things worse. And look, I often get criticized from the far left. I'm not a fan of Maduro. I think Maduro has done things that are wrong. I think he's mismanaged the economy, and I think he has not upheld human rights. But just because you think that Maduro is wrong doesn't mean that you go in and anoint some other leader and encouraged a civil war. What you do is what the Pope in Mexico and Uruguay were working towards, a political settlement that ultimately would have led to new elections. And that's what the international community should be behind. That's what a lot of the OAS states want. But instead, and some have followed the United States lead, they're letting their judgment on Maduro drive a policy that's actually playing into Maduro's hands, because Maduro is up there saying, look, these foreign powers are intervening.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Congressman Ro Khanna is with us. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Congressman Ro Khanna is with us for the hour, taking your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program. It's coming up on 17 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Grant in Kenmore, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Good day. I kind of wanted to put a challenge out there. So be aware of natural resources that surround us. And that challenge would be to grow a piece of food for yourself to eat. Grant,
do you have a question for Congressman Khanna?
Well, that was the challenge, to be more aware of your natural resources.
So you're asking him to grow food. Okay, Congressman?
Grant, it's something I haven't done in adult life. I will admit to that. You know, my parents, growing up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, used to have a vegetable garden, and I used to do that, and my dad and mom are still very fond of gardening, but it's probably a thoughtful suggestion. I mean, I'm sure we all could learn to at least growing something in terms of having a respect for both the natural environment and the work of so many who do help produce food. So it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, agreed. Adam in Salem, Mass. Hey, Adam, what's up? You're on with Congressman Khanna.
Hey, Congressman, how you doing? It looks an awful like Trump blackmailed the Qataris into investing in Jared Kushner's building. And I wanted to ask you, is the Congress investigating this? And if the president did use the full weight of the U.S. government to basically enrich one of his relatives by $1 billion, wouldn't this be his greatest crime of all?
Adam, I think that the allegations you point to about the monetization of the presidency, this idea that people will buy things from the family members or do business with the family members because they want to curry favor with the president, are the most actually serious allegations against this president. You know, in third world countries or in other countries, or the way things used to be in places like India and China, rarely do people directly bribe someone. What they do is they say, oh, you know, we paid for their kids' education, or we did business with their business. And it's a deep concern that those type of tactics may be taking place today in the United States of America. So the Oversight Committee, on which I sit, are looking into emoluments issues, the violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, which basically says that you can't sell off assets based on your government position for private gain. You can't monetize the presidency.
Is there, we just have 30 seconds at the break, has this issue of Qatar being the major investor in this fund that gave Jared Kushner $1 billion right after Qatar was blockaded by the Saudis, and then they ended that blockade within a week of the time that he gave the money to Kushner. That seems pretty conclusive to me. Is anybody in Congress specifically looking at that as a potential crime?
There's been discussion of it, but none of the committees have. But after this call, I'm actually going to see if, with Elijah Cummings, if the Oversight Committee can look into this as well. There's been so much focus on the Russian investments and some of the other countries, but we absolutely need to look into this.
Yeah, I agree. Just the timing of it. I'll send you a note with the name. There's a journalist who's just doing some shocking reporting on this, and we had her on this program a week or so. I'll get that information to you.
Yeah, please do, and I'll send it to Elijah Cummings.
Great, we'll do it. It's 21 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls for Congressman Ro Khanna right after this. We put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Ro Khanna, Congressman Ro Khanna on the line with us, the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, representing California's 17th District in the U.S. House of Representatives, with us for the hour. And, this is strange. It's like my mouse just croaked. Hang on, I've got another mouse here. We've got a backup mouse, which is always great. And so, Jeff in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Thanks for taking my call, Tom, and it's an honor to speak with you, Congressman. My question is, I know we've had a weird news cycle, and there's been a lot of coverage with the Mueller report and the Barr hearings, but I just wanted to ask the Congressman's opinion of the stance between Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer meeting with the president for the infrastructure. Why did they meet with him and agree to a deal when Trump's approval ratings were at an all-time low and all these other things were going on?
Well, Jeff, I think there's a desire in this Congress to get things done for the American people. I mean, even when Nixon was being impeached, Congress still passed the Endangered Species Act, the War Powers Resolution, and a major highway bill. So we have an obligation to address our infrastructure. And I support the $2 trillion investment. The challenge is it just political posturing, or is the president serious? When the Republicans in the Senate say, we aren't going to do this because we don't want to raise taxes that are going to be required to pay for this or have any deficit spending on infrastructure, what's going to happen? My hope is that they will be supportive, but my skepticism or cynicism is that when push comes to shove, the Republicans in the Senate won't support the required revenue raisers to be able to do this.
Ivan in Bartlett, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hey, Congressman, you are the best. Thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Ivan.
In my opinion, the fact is our government is now controlled by religious theocrats who believe everything happening is God's will. They don't care what scientists say because we are in the end times. And God will rapture them up to heaven so they're saved. And for everybody else, too bad. Nothing's going to change, Congressman, until we go to the polls in 2020 and crush the GOP by electing Democrats who believe in science, not superstitious nonsense. I know this is a controversial thing.
So, Ivan, do you have a question for Congressman Khanna?
Yeah. Yeah, Congressman. Don't you agree that the only way we're going to get anything done scientifically and ending these stupid wars is by crushing the GOP and electing Democrats?
Okay. Thanks, Ivan.
I appreciate that. Your comments remind me of the Lincoln quote that his concern is not whether God is on his side, but whether he is on God's side. And I know a lot of people are invoking religion in a way of partisanship to justify their positions, and that has never been the American tradition. I mean, the American scriptures, to the extent that there are American scriptures, are the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and our founding documents. It is concerning that there are Republicans today who don't believe in basic things that built this country, investing in the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health, some of the basic research and development that this country has always done. And we do need to elect people who are going to stand up for science.
Congressman Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for him in just a moment. Got a little break here at the bottom of the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Congressman Khanna is the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. His website, Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Ro Khanna. We're reading from the Mueller report. This is from Section 1, Part 1, and page 11. And this is from the part titled The Special Counsel's Investigation, which is describing the scope of it. The special counsel, the order stated, is authorized to conduct the investigation confirmed by then FBI Director James B. Comey in testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on March 20th, 2017, including 1. Any links and or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump, and 2. Any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, and 3. Any other matters within the scope of 28 CFR 600.4. Appointment order. Section 600.4 affords the special counsel, quote, the authority to investigate and prosecute federal crimes committed in the course of and with the intent to interfere with the special counsel's investigation, such as perjury, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and intimidation of witnesses. End of quote. The authority to investigate, quote, any matters that arose during the investigation, end quote, appointment order B2, covers similar crimes that may have occurred during the course of the FBI's confirmed investigation before the special counsel's appointment. Quote, if the special counsel believes it is necessary and appropriate, the order further provided, the special counsel is authorized to prosecute federal crimes arising from the investigation of these matters. Finally, the acting attorney general made applicable sections 600.4 through 600.10 of Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The acting attorney general further clarified the scope of the special counsel's investigatory authority in 2 subsequent memoranda. A memorandum dated August 2nd, 2017, explained that the appointment order had been, quote, worded categorically in order to permit its public release without confirming specific investigations involving specific individuals, end quote. It then confirmed that the special counsel has been authorized since his appointment to investigate allegations that 3 Trump campaign officials, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, and George Papadopoulos, quote, committed a crime or crimes by colluding with Russian government officials with respect to the Russian government's efforts to interfere with the 2016 presidential campaign, or election, end quote. The memorandum also confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate certain other matters, including 2 additional sets of allegations involving Manafort, parenthesis, crimes arising from payments he received from the Ukrainian government, and crimes arising from his receipt of loans from a bank whose CEO was then seeking a position in the Trump administration, close parenthesis. Allegations that Papadopoulos committed a crime or crimes by acting as an unregistered agent of the Israeli government, and 4 sets of allegations involving Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to President Trump. On October 20th, 2017, the acting attorney general confirmed in a memorandum the special counsel's investigative authority as to several individuals and entities. First, quote, as part of a full and thorough investigation of the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, the special counsel was authorized to investigate, quote, the pertinent activities of Michael Cohen, Richard Gates, redacted, Roger Stone, and redacted. Confirmation, quote, confirmation of the authorization to investigate such individuals, close quote, the memorandum stressed, quote, does not suggest that the special counsel has made a determination that any of them has committed a crime, end quote. Second, with respect to Michael Cohen, the memorandum recognized the special counsel's authority to investigate, quote, leads related to Cohen's establishment and use of Essential Consultants LLC to, inter alia, receive funds from Russian-backed entities, end quote. Third, the memorandum memorialized the special counsel's authority to investigate individuals and entities who were possibly engaged in jointly undertaken activity with existing subjects of the investigation, including Paul Manafort. Finally, the memorandum described an FBI investigation opened before the special counsel's appointment into allegations that then Attorney General Jeff Sessions made false statements to the United States Senate and confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate that matter. The special counsel structured the investigation in view of his power and authority to, quote, exercise all investigative and prosecutorial functions of any United States attorney, end quote. Like a U.S. attorney's office, the special counsel's office considered a range of classified and unclassified information available to the FBI in the course of the office's Russia investigation. And the office structured that work around evidence for possible use in prosecutions of federal crimes, assuming that one or more crimes was identified that warranted prosecution. There was substantial evidence immediately available to the special counsel at the inception of the investigation in May 2017 because the FBI had, by that time, already investigated Russian election interference for nearly 10 months. The special counsel's office exercised its judgment regarding what to investigate and did not, for instance, investigate every public report of a contact between the Trump campaign and Russian-affiliated individuals and entities. The office has included its investigation into links and coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Certain proceedings associated with the office's work remain ongoing. After consultation with the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, the office has transferred responsibility for those remaining issues to other components of the Department of Justice and the FBI. Appendix D lists those transfers. I would add 12 of the 14 are redacted. So this is reading from the Mueller Report, Part 1, Section 1.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Congressman Ro Khanna on the line with us for the hour, taking your calls. Morris in Long Beach, California, listening on KPFK. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hey, Congressman, take this one back with you to Washington. I hope you got a sense of humor. What does the Bible and Donald Trump's tax returns have in common? They both tell it all. Now, listen, Congressman, we are in uncharted waters right now, okay? It's not about the laws. It's about enforcement. I got an idea for your congressman. The guy who was in charge of the House Ways and Means Committee that's requested Donald Trump's tax return for the last 6 years, here's what I want you to do. Tell him to send a letter over to Steve Mnuchin to come on over to the House where you all meet for an off-the-record discussion, a luncheon about the taxes, off the record. As soon as he gets over there, you have the sergeant of arms arrest him. You got it? And put him in jail. Nobody's got dominion over that location except for the Speaker of the House, okay? So that's how you do this. You're dealing with organized crime. straight up. Well, I listen to you. I saw you on Fox News. You know, you're a smart man. You understand who you're dealing with. Okay, but I'm from the hood. We're dealing with organized crime. The only way you deal with organized crime is income tax evasion and tax fraud, Al Capone style. All this stuff about courts, they own the courts. They own everything, and they don't have to comply with nothing. But when you lock up Steve Mnuchin in your jail down up in there, they're going to respond to that. We got to get crazy with this. So, again, we're in uncharted waters. And always keep Jesus in it, right? Meaning whatever you're doing it with some principles. You're not just doing it just to win for yourself. You're thinking of everybody. Go to St. Matthew chapter 25, verse 40. That's how we operate up in here. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate and respect your passion. Richie Neal and Jerry Nadler have said, in fact, explicitly said that the Sergeant at Arms does have power. It's an inherent power that Congress has. I don't think Congress has used it for nearly 100 years, but Sam Erwin threatened to use it during the Watergate hearings with White House aides. He said, well, I'm going to send the Sergeant at Arms to get folks, and Nixon then backed down, and a lot of the aides testified. I don't think it should be the first option, and obviously would trigger a huge crisis in this country. But if you see court orders being defied, and the courts will rule on this quickly, then we may be left with no choice. But my assumption is that the courts will rule for us and will require testimony or require people to comply.
Louise in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi. Thank you very much, Congressman. I was very excited that several callers today were bringing up concerns about perpetual war. And I'm a member of an advocacy team of the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and is working this year to support Representative Barbara Lee's bill to repeal the authorization for the use of military force that got us into war against Afghanistan and a whole host of other countries. Our Seattle team was very excited when the Progressive Caucus voted to support Representative Lee's bill. And you and my very own representative, Representative Jayapal, are co-chairs of that Progressive Caucus. I feel that most people are really unaware of how the U.S. gets into war, and yet it's Congress's role to declare war. And I'm wondering if you and Tom might host a session on the AUMF and have Representative Barbara Lee come and speak.
Well, Louise, I think that's an excellent idea. Barbara Lee is an icon in the United States Congress. I've often said that if the book Profiles in Courage were to be updated, there would be a chapter on Barbara Lee. She was the only one post 9/11 who understood that the AUMF that passed was way too broad. It had no geographic restriction. It had no time restriction. We're still using the AUMF passed in 2001 to be at war in Afghanistan or Syria. And she was the lone voice of caution in voting against that bill. I mean, she believed that we needed to have strikes against al-Qaeda, but that it was too open-ended as the AUMF. And she now has made tremendous progress in working towards its repeal. I think she will succeed in the House for sure, this Congress, and then it goes, of course, to the Senate. But I certainly would be happy to do anything with her in terms of having her recommending she come on this show or be on a panel. She's a real icon.
Amen. Colleen in Manorville, New York. Colleen, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Good afternoon, gentlemen, and thank you for taking my call. I want to say first, Tom, that you are such a hardworking person, and you putting the Mueller report together for everybody is, I know, a tremendous amount of work, and it really is eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people that don't have access, to that information. Now, as far as the Barr hearings, I think that he really won when I say that, and this is to Congressman Khanna. I think he's got everybody dancing around. And I feel badly because he accomplished what he wanted, which is to stall. He pretended he didn't understand a question, didn't understand the meaning of a word, and he just kind of danced around, and everybody's like being played like puppets off strings. But my question to Congressman Khanna is it possible, instead of worrying about, you have those people in Congress that are going to deal with this obstruction of justice issue, but you also have this money trail that these people all around the world who are buying into, not just the United States, but other countries, London, or in England, and they're secreting money, and is the money world that they're all part of a way to get to this, as some callers have brought up about the IRS and money laundering and hiding assets and that sort of thing, and that's my question.
Well, Eileen, first of all, I agree with you about Bill Barr. He was dancing around, and he's the definition of what our founders would have considered a sophist, which is someone who uses his education and rhetorical skills not in the pursuit of truth, but to be clever rhetorically and to mislead and to be deceptive for personal gain. We have to figure out a way to hold him accountable. I think the American people see right through him. I think we need more people doing what Thom Hartmann is doing with the Mueller report. A lot of people haven't read it, but we have to bring it to life for the American public. And this is why I think the president is so concerned about having people like Don McGahn or Bob Mueller testify on television, because he knows that they will dramatize it, just like Tom has done for so many of his listeners. In terms of the financial fraud and financial crimes, I agree with you. That's where the president is actually most vulnerable, and the committees are looking into that. It probably deserves more media attention than it's even getting, but we're going to continue to look at the financial conflicts of interest and potential financial crimes on the Oversight Committee.
Les in Puyallup, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi, this is Les. Hello.
Hi, Les.
My concerns are with Mitch McConnell, because he early on when Obama took office, he was going to squash everything that came in. And I'm thinking, is he going to do the same thing with what's happening with Nancy Pelosi's deal? Because you have to remember that Trump said that way back when that Acosta thing happened during the election change there, and when Paul Ryan ducked out like a coward and Nancy Pelosi took over, he said, you want to fight me, then we're going to have to fight. So what do you think?
Well, Les, Mitch McConnell hasn't done anything constructive since I've been here in terms of moving forward any of the big bills, and he has been in lockstep with the White House in doing their bidding. So you're right to be concerned that he could sabotage any efforts of investigation or accountability in the House that emerges to hold this administration accountable. He also may sabotage this infrastructure bill if he doesn't agree to any tax increases to pay for it, or doesn't agree to have a deficit-financed infrastructure bill. So he remains a huge challenge for anyone who wants a progressive agenda in the Congress.
Ken in Goose Creek, South Carolina. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna. And we have just 1 minute till we hit the next break here. So real quick, Ken, please.
Yeah, Congressman Khan, would you please answer me just yes or no if you would condemn Representative Ilhan Omar's comments yesterday that America is responsible for the civil unrest in Venezuela right now?
Well, I think it's a more complicated issue. I think that I would blame Maduro for the way he has governed, and I would blame Guaido and the opposition for not agreeing to a settlement. But what I would say is that America's foreign policy has made the situation worse, not better. That what we ought to have done is defer to the Pope or Mexico or Uruguay for a negotiated settlement. So the blame is with the current government in Venezuela. The sad part is that America has not made the situation any better.
Congressman Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour. His website, Khanna, K-H-A-N-N-A, .house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep Ro Khanna, R-E-P Ro Khanna, and R-O-K-H-A-N-N-A. He's the co-chair, or excuse me, the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and he represents the 17th District of California, Silicon Valley area. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Khanna right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Congressman Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Josh in Boulder, Colorado. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hello, Congressman. Thanks for all you do. Climate change is the greatest security threat facing our nation and people. I'm inspired by Greta Thunberg, Extinction Rebellion, and the student activists striking wrong in the nation. It won't just take a change in how we get our energy and transportation, but study after study from the UN and published in the Lancet Journal show a need to greatly reduce our consumption of animals. California passed plant-based meals in hospitals last year. What are you doing to address this, factory farms, and all the other issues related to our food policy with respect to climate change?
Well, you're right to bring up the link between climate change and some of the abuses at CAFOs and our factory farms. I am working with Food and Water Watch and legislation that would first take on the concentration of CAFOs where they are not being held accountable for manure that they are having leave the farms or the dirty water that they are causing, so holding them accountable for environmental regulations. And second, to deal with the concentration in the ag industry, which is hurting factory farmers and is also leading to further degradation of the environment.
Joe in Haleyville, Alabama. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yes, Tom and Congressman, good to talk to you today.
Thank
Congressman, I have a question. The oligarch, the one that owns the big aluminum plant that is supposed to do something in Kentucky for Mitch McConnell, is that not the same oligarch that is mentioned in the Mueller report?
Joe, I'm not sure. I mean, Tom, do you know?
I believe so. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that McConnell led the crusade to get the sanctions against him specifically dropped, and his steel and aluminum companies, and now he's going to put a $200 million aluminum factory in Kentucky just in time for the elections, but. Whether he's specifically or how he's specifically called out in the Mueller report, I can't tell you. I'm sorry. I'd have to pull it up and do a Control-F search.
But Joe, I appreciate you bringing it up. And again, on the Oversight Committee, I'll bring it to the committee's attention, and it's worth looking at. There's so much unfortunately, so much in terms of lawlessness and allegations of corruption that our plate is too full, and that's the sad part of the state of our democracy.
Yeah. We just have 40 seconds to the break here, Congressman. How do you see this playing out? Do you think go ahead.
I think it's going to come down to Mueller's testimony. I think Mueller is going to testify before Congress. My guess is that is going to have the eyes of the nation on that testimony more than any presidential debate, arguably as much as a Super Bowl. I think everyone will tune in. And the American people are probably going to make a determination based on what Mueller says and what people think of Mueller. I mean, he has an incredible amount of credibility. So that's my sense.
Yeah, I suspect you're right. Congressman Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Khanna in just a moment. His website, khanna.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep Ro Khanna, REPROKHANNA. We'll be right back. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Tom's. Congressman O'Connor taking your calls for the hour. And Ellis in Honolulu, Hawaii, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hello, and thank you so much, the both of you, for the work that you're doing. I have two questions. I'm going to give them back to back so that he can work with them. And this is concerning the most important issue underlying, in my idea, our ability to do anything else long term. The first one is, are the bulk of Congress people communicating with their governors, mayors, county officials to guarantee the use of recountable paper ballots to avoid, eliminate, circumvent domestic or foreign election manipulation in strategic districts, which can flip the voters' will, especially primaries, a la 2016 evidence that Bernie suddenly started losing to Hillary? And the second question is election machine vote flipping as it to delegitimize. Can we go back and look at election machine vote flipping as an ability to delegitimize Trump's reign? And then going after the damage that he has done to get not only him, but him and Pence out of office and undo the judge and other government appointments that he's made that are destroying our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellis.
Thank you, Alice, for that question. I'm on Mark Pocan's bill. Mark Pocan's the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus to require paper ballots in every jurisdiction. I certainly have spoken with Gavin Newsom's team about the need to do that in my home state of California. Here's the good news and bad news. The good news in American democracy, and I represent Silicon Valley, so I get to speak with a lot of tech experts, is it's very hard to rig an election nationally because of our messiness. I mean, every locality has basically its own way of counting, its own procedures. That said, it is possible to rig or interfere in particular counties, in particular local races, or, frankly, in particular battleground states to see if there's a particular county you can run interference in that may flip that state's result. And that's why we do need some federal legislation that's uniform on paper ballots and on security. And I don't think we can just rely or leave that up to every state and every jurisdiction.
Roger in Lake Ariel, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi. Congressman, I had a question on how difficult would it be to repeal taxing senior adult Social Security payments and also garnishing monies for Medicaid or Medicare from their Social Security payments. And if you will, next time you see Congressman Cartwright, say hello. He's new to the Congress.
Well, Roger, thanks. Matt Cartwright's terrific. I think he's been here a few terms and cares a lot about Pennsylvania, obviously, and also senior issues. I do think that if to the extent we're going to give tax breaks, tax credits, it should be for working families or seniors who are on modest incomes. And I much rather we have had the type of tax relief you're talking about than the tax relief we did for Wall Street investors and large corporations. So I am open to providing some tax relief to people who are receiving Social Security and are on an income that doesn't allow them to have a comfortable middle-class life.
Chuck in Attleboro Falls, Massachusetts. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yeah, I just got a question about everything that's going on with the new investigations. Is he at all concerned that his freedom might be at risk when all these Democrats get thrown in prison because they try to overthrow the government? And they had a coup going on, and it was a conspiracy to get Trump out of office. Are you at all concerned for your own freedom?
Chuck, I've never thought of it that way. I don't think we are near that place, and the reason I say that is I think it's important not to be alarmist in this country. We already have a politics that's way too polarized. But I do fear for the safety, particularly of some of the women of color in Congress, some of the freshmen in Congress, who have received genuinely death threats, who have been targeted because of the kind of rhetoric. And I fear for them. I genuinely am concerned about their security.
Congressman, we have just 30 seconds left to the end of the hour. I'm curious your thoughts on what we should be paying attention to as we go into the next week or two. What should we be looking for? Where should we be focusing our activism and our phone calls to Congress?
Well, Tom, I know you spend a lot of time on Venezuela. It's so important for people to have their voice heard on this issue. There are, unfortunately, certain Democrats who also want us to get involved in Venezuela. Here's the irony. You know what Guaido has called his mission? He's called it Operation Freedom, the exact same thing that Bush called the invasion in Iraq. And we need to make sure this time that Democrats stand united in opposition to any further military escalation in Venezuela. Your listeners' perspective and calls will make a difference because this is on the minds of members of Congress. Second, I learn something every time I'm on the show, and
I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Good.
Congressman,
No
thanks so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
From Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor's report to the Justice Department about the Russian interference in the election and Donald Trump's role in it. This is from the introduction to Volume 1, page 1. The Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election in sweeping and systematic fashion. Evidence of Russian government operations began to surface in mid-2016. In June, the Democratic National Committee and its cyber response team publicly announced that Russian hackers had compromised its computer network. Releases of hacked materials, hacks that public reporting soon attributed to the Russian government, began that same month. Additional releases followed in July through the organization WikiLeaks, with further releases in October and November. In late July 2016, soon after WikiLeaks' first release of stolen documents, a foreign government contacted the FBI about a May 2016 encounter with Trump campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos had suggested to a representative of that foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications that the Russian government, that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. That information prompted the FBI on July 31st, 2016, to open an investigation into whether individuals associated with the Trump campaign were coordinating with the Russian government in its interference activities. That fall, 2 federal agencies jointly announced that the Russian government, quote, directed recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including U.S. political organizations, and these thefts and disclosures are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process, end quote. After the election in late December 2016, the United States imposed sanctions on Russia for having interfered in the election. By early 2017, several congressional committees were examining Russia's interference in the election. Within the executive branch, these investigatory efforts ultimately led to the May 2017 appointment of Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III. The order appointing the special counsel authorized him to investigate, quote, the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, including any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. As set forth in detail in this report, the special counsel's investigation established that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election principally through 2 operations. First, a Russian entity carried out a social media campaign that favored presidential candidate Donald J. Trump and disparaged presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Second, a Russian intelligence service conducted counter-intrusion operations against entities, employees, and volunteers working on the Clinton campaign and then released stolen documents. The investigation also identified numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. Although the investigation established that the Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, and that the campaign expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Below, we describe the evidentiary considerations underpinning statements about the results of our investigation and the special counsel's charging decisions, and we then provide an overview of the 2 volumes of our report. The report describes actions and events that the special counsel's office found to be supported by the evidence collected in our investigation. In some instances, the report points out the absence of evidence or conflicts in the evidence about a particular fact or event. In other instances, when substantial, credible evidence enabled the office to reach the conclusion with confidence where that happened. The report states that the investigation established that certain actions or events occurred. A statement that the investigation did not establish particular facts does not mean there was no evidence of those facts. In evaluating whether evidence about collective action of multiple individuals constituted a crime, we applied the framework of conspiracy law, not the concept of collusion. In so doing, the office recognized that the word collude was used in communications with the acting attorney general, confirming certain aspects of the investigation's scope, and that the term has been frequently invoked in public reporting about the investigation. But collusion is not a specific offense or theory of liability found in the United States Code, nor is it a term of art in federal criminal law. For those reasons, the office's focus on analyzing questions of joint criminal liability was on conspiracy as defined in federal law. In connection with that analysis, we addressed the factual question whether members of the Trump campaign, quote, coordinated, a term that appears in the appointment order, with Russian election interference activities. We understood coordination does not have a settled definition in federal criminal law. We understood coordination to require an agreement, tacit or express, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government on election interference. That requires more than the 2 parties taking actions that were informed by or responsive to the other's actions or interests. We applied the term coordination in that sense when stating in the report that the investigation did not establish that the Trump campaign coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. The report on our investigation consists of 2 volumes. Volume 1 describes the factual results of the special counsel's investigation of Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election and its interactions with the Trump campaign. Section 1 describes the scope of the investigation. Sections 2 and 3 describe the principal ways Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election. The Mueller report. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. In the previous hour, when Congressman Khanna was on the line taking your calls for the hour, numerous people called to ask about impeachment. In our first hour, the subject comes up about every 15 minutes on this program, it seems. On the line with us is a guy who knows a lot about this, or at least why somebody maybe should be impeached. He is the former chief White House ethics lawyer for several years, from 2005 to 2007, under George W. Bush, a former Republican, a current law professor at the University of Minnesota, Richard Painter. Richard Painter, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So what is your case? I understand that you're calling for the explicit opening that the Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler's committee in the U.S. House of Representatives should open hearings and specifically call them impeachment hearings, presumably so that they'll get those Article III powers and essentially be a grand jury and begin the process. What's your case?
Well, the case is laid out in the second half of the Mueller report on obstruction of justice. It's very clearly obstruction of justice that President Trump engaged in. Whether it could be criminally charged by the Department of Justice is a complex constitutional question because, one, the Department of Justice is not willing to indict a sitting president for anything. That's their position. And second, there's some questions about whether it's actually a crime for the president to terminate investigation by the FBI or the Justice Department into himself because he can terminate any investigation he wants. So say believers in the so-called unitary executive theory. Well, that's a constitutional question that would have been resolved if Richard Nixon had not gotten a pardon and been tried for obstruction of justice. But where we are now is that Robert Mueller was not willing to urge the Justice Department to indict a president in circumstances where the Justice Department made it very clear that under its interpretation of the Constitution, he could not be criminally indicted. But impeachment is a whole different matter. And the Mueller report very clearly indicates that that's a matter, that portion of the report on obstruction of justice is for the House Judiciary Committee to consider. I believe that even the unredacted portions of the Mueller report are far more than what we need to go ahead and impeach the president and charge him and then have a trial in the Senate where additional evidence can be obtained. And that's on top of all the other problems with this presidency, such as the foreign government emoluments in violation of the United States Constitution, the threats the president has made toward a free press in violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution. The list of serious high crimes and misdemeanors goes on and on. So this is a situation where the House Judiciary Committee does need to vote out articles of impeachment so this can proceed to the Senate.
The Office of Legal Counsel, is basically the lawyer for the Justice Department. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. And back in 1973, during the Nixon administration, ironically, they concluded that the Justice Department can't indict a sitting president. I believe that has been reaffirmed once since then. What are your thoughts on that determination by the OLC? That seems crazy to me.
And that's a determination that also legal counsel, which does give legal advice interpreting the Constitution and the statutes as it believes it should be interpreted. And sometimes that advice is good, sometimes it's not. They had the infamous torture memos in the Bush administration before I went to the White House, I should emphasize. Mm-hmm. And they've had also a reversal on the issue of the anti-nepotism statute. The same office, OLC, told Jimmy Carter he couldn't have his son be an intern in the White House. And then they turned around and told Donald Trump he could hire Jared and Ivanka. So they have changed their position on a number of things, including the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution. Here also, they've taken a position that here is consistent, I guess, what they were doing under Nixon, saying that you could not indict a sitting president. The constitutional theory behind that is that if a president commits a crime, it's up to the Congress to impeach him and remove him. Then he could be indicted for the crime, as opposed to the prosecutors going and indicting the president when he has not yet been impeached, and that it would somehow interfere with his ability to conduct his.
I read a fragment of that OLC finding, and they went through this long thing about how the president has such great responsibilities and such great burdens and so many demands on his time, and therefore we don't want to, it would actually, the argument as I read it was that it would actually put the country at risk if the president wasn't able to do his job because he was distracted by a criminal indictment. The guy in the White House right now is spending literally 6 to 8 hours a day watching television and tweeting, and has spent more time on the golf course in a year and a half than any president in the history of the United States. It just doesn't seem that rationalization, or at least that particular piece of the rationalization of the OLC memo, makes any sense in this context.
Well, it certainly doesn't with this president, and I got to say that one very important case that's undermined at least some of that rationale is Jones versus Clinton, where the U.S. Supreme Court did decide the president could be sued in a civil suit despite being president. And Paula Jones was allowed to proceed with her suit. And I find it somewhat troubling, the notion that a president could be sued civilly over an alleged sexual harassment years ago in Arkansas while he's sitting in the White House, that's not too much of a burden on the presidency. And yet if a president obstructs justice while he's in the White House or engages in any other crimes, that somehow a criminal prosecution of the president for those crimes would be too much of a distraction. So we have yet to see how that would play out, whether the Jones versus Clinton case would change any of that analysis, but the OLC has stuck to its guns. Of course, OLC is doing pretty much what President Trump wants it to do, and that's the position they've taken. So the bottom line is no federal prosecutor would have the ability to charge President Trump if the Attorney General won't let them do it, and this Attorney General is not going to let them do it. So that's why Robert Mueller really had no choice. He couldn't recommend an indictment of the president. That was just not an option on the table.
Yeah, I get it. So what are your thoughts on the impeachment of William Barr? When the previous Attorney General, the Obama Attorney General, Eric Holder, was held in contempt of Congress for refusing to turn over the Fast and Furious documents. His rationale was that Congress was going to release these to the public and that would compromise an ongoing investigation into gun running down on our southern border. He felt that it was just being politicized. And they held him in contempt of Congress. It went to the courts. It took 6 years to litigate, as I recall, or at least that's what Tom Perez said on this program yesterday, the chair of the DNC. I don't think we can wait 6 years. I mean, isn't an impeachment of Bill Barr in order?
Well, I think there are two sets of issues. One is refusing to turn over documents, which is what happened in the Eric Holder case, and we have some of that going on here, too, where they're refusing to turn over the unredacted version of the Mueller report.
Right.
I do have to say I think that turning over an unredacted version of this report about a Russian attack on our electoral system is a lot more important than all that stuff that was going on with Fast and Furious, which was more about politics. But the real, we can debate about whether impeachment is appropriate remedy for refusal to comply with a single subpoena. But Bill Barr has another problem, is he may not have been truthful to Congress in his discussion, at least of his contacts with Robert Mueller and what Robert Mueller thought about the summary of the Mueller report, the 4-page summary that Bill Barr put out. And if he was not truthful to Congress, that is a very serious offense. And generally, attorneys general have had to resign over that.
Isn't that what Mitchell, Attorney General Mitchell in the Nixon administration went to prison for 19 months for?
Yeah, he went to prison for 19 months. His successor, Attorney General Kleindienst, did lie to Congress basically about what President Nixon had told him about the ITT investigation. So Kleindienst was forced to resign, pled guilty to a lower criminal offense than perjury, but did plead guilty to criminal offense. We had the situation under President Bush with Alberto Gonzales, the Attorney General, who gave inaccurate testimony about what happened with the firing of the U.S. attorneys. Now, he may very well have not been adequately prepared over at the Justice Department for his congressional hearing. He was never charged with anything, but he did resign in the wake of that. And here again, we have an attorney general whose candor, a lack of candor to Congress, is a very serious problem. We already had this with Jeff Sessions, who didn't tell the truth and answered Senator Franken's questions about the Russians. And, I think that if Attorney General Barr lied, which is what Nancy Pelosi said, that, flat out lie to Congress would be an impeachment offense.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Richard Painter. Richard, thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great talking with you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Anything Goes Friday. Back with your calls right after this. I don't think it's either. Welcome back. Jeff in Portland, Oregon, listening on X-Ray FM. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Another great Friday show, so thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me begin by saying that it's my humble opinion that for the last 40 years, politically speaking, we've been living in an age of ignorance. And I always like to tell people ignorance is bliss until the chickens come home to roost. And whether you look at the increasingly destructive floods, fires, storms, and droughts brought on by climate change, or whether it's the opioid epidemic, homelessness, affordable housing crises, or the tragic growing dependence on GoFundMe accounts to pay for health care, all these and more are exacerbated by the massive income inequality and the gig economy. So whatever you focus on, wherever you look, Tom, the chickens are coming home to roost here in America. And despite the corporate media's unwillingness and or incompetence to broaden out the story of the Russian interference into a meaningful discussion of the vulnerability of our election system, as your previous caller talking about paper ballots was mentioning, we know that voter suppression and the security of electronic voting are the best chances for the GOP to continue running us into the ground.
Right.
And as usual, Tom, you've done great reporting on these issues. But I think one story, and a while back you were asking, is there one story that that you haven't covered that's worth covering? Because you've been way ahead of the curve on like the Nixon interference in the LBJ peace treaty, and also talking about the Reagan interference in Carter's reelection with the hostages, Iran hostages. But I think there's one story that could use your spotlight, and that's the 2004 Bush-Kerry election.
Yeah.
I think
and Ohio.
Ohio. Yeah. Definitely, with Karl Rove and Smart Tech Incorporated rigging the electronic voting.
Well, I think what most people don't know, it's not just that. It's that the actual count of the vote was done. You know, they were counting the votes, and then at 11:15 or something at night, the systems failed in Ohio, so they went to the backup system, and the backup system was provided by a for-profit company in Kentucky, as I recall. Maybe
Tennessee.
Tennessee. Okay, thank you. I always mix those two states up. In Tennessee, that was also the company that was providing the secure email service for GWB 43 or whatever it was, the website, you know, and the email thing that lost 5 million of George Bush's emails and Dick Cheney's emails. And I mean, everybody's all upset about Hillary Clinton having a private server. This was their private server, and those emails are actually gone. I mean, we've recovered Hillary's. They turned a clone over to the FBI. So, and they were the ones who were keeping the copy of the reports, you know, the vote totals for Ohio, so that when Ohio's government-controlled servers crashed, they reached out to this company in Tennessee and said, give us the numbers. The company said, okay, here it is. George Bush won.
Yeah, and like you say, it happened about, I think, 11 p.m. at night, and right before that, Kerry was ahead, I think, by 4 or 5 points. They come back on, the system comes back up, and he's down by 4 or 5 points.
Right.
And also, Tom, in that same 2004 election, the GOP spent money to knock Howard Dean out of the primary race and get John Kerry to be our nominee. So that's another thing.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, although I think, frankly, the media took Howard Dean down with the whole Dean scream, phony baloney thing. Jeff, thank you for the call. We'll be back. It's 20 minutes past the hour and change. You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, you know, all you have to do is go over to ThomHartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Let's pick up our phone calls here. Anything goes Friday. Charles in Opelika, Florida. Hey, Charles, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good. What's on your mind?
My question is.
I can barely hear you, Charles.
All right, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, you know, Charles, I'm going to put you on hold and let you negotiate this with Nick. He's on line 4, Nick, and let's get your phone working before we put you on the air. Barbara in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Barbara, what's up?
Hello, Tom. How are you doing?
Good.
I haven't talked to you in a while.
Thank you.
You know, last Saturday, God blessed me to be 73 years old.
Oh, congratulations.
And I'm thinking that while we are being distracted by the Mueller report, which is very important, do not get me wrong. We have a little, and excuse the word, a little pig called William Barr that's working for Trump.
Yep.
And whatever else we have, you know, that's swirling around that pay attention to this, pay attention to this, pay attention to this. In the meantime, they are taking health care from American citizens.
Well, they're trying to. Yeah. Well, actually, a number of states have actually done it. You're right, Barbara.
Yeah, you know, people have something. We pay for this. You know, anything in America we get ain't free. Freedom is not free.
Yeah.
You have to work for freedom. We have to get up off ourselves and quit listening to the media. We have to listen to people. I listen to your program every day religiously, which is a word I don't like to use, but I use it. The people that call you are very intelligent, very articulate, and very smart. They know what's going on. If you know what's going on, get up, march, cry, Do whatever you have to do. But we have to vote because this is starting to get ridiculous. We're getting children getting killed in schools. The University of North Carolina, come on, what's going on?
Yeah, we've had 4 mass shootings in 1 week.
This makes no sense.
Yeah.
If a country like New Zealand can say no, I grew up with guns. I grew up on a truck farm. We shot food, squirrels, rabbits, stuff like that. We had a rifle. We didn't need an MR or whatever they're using now.
Yep.
America, sometimes I get so frustrated. I was in a grocery store, and I had my, I wear my Barack Obama cap all the time. I heard him get done.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy stopped me. He said, I miss this man so bad. He said, sometimes I cry. I looked at his shopping cart of him and his wife. The food they had in there would not keep a dog alive for a couple of days. Old people are starving in this country that claims our economy is booming.
Yeah.
For who?
Yep.
I cry. I pray. I cry. This is getting to be... This man has got to go, and he has to take all his sycophants with him. These are harpies. They're raping us. They're killing us. They literally do not care. I'm sick and tired about Donald Trump. Get rid of him. He's got to go.
No,
I'm everybody with him.
I am with you, Barbara, and your eloquence and passion is noted and contagious. Thank you so much for the call. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate it. Whoops, I just dumped Charles. Charles called back. My apologies. I did that by mistake. Buck in San Clemente, California. Hey, Buck, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Happy Friday.
Thank you. We just have a minute, by the way, Buck.
Okay. I just got a minute, and we just have a few months before Mitch McConnell puts the big kibosh on everything, any subpoenas, any impeachment hearings, because it's going to be too close to the election. He's going to say he's going to Merrick Garland us.
Right.
Okay? So
I think he's already doing
it.
it.
Networks. Exactly. All over the networks, I hear the Republicans saying, "Oh, the Dems want to slow walk this because the election and all of that." Well, I think we ought to start using the term fast walk. We want to fast walk this because Supreme Court will soon be out of session, and then we'll have to wait till next October, and then they're going to definitely say, it's too close to the elections.
Yeah.
So.
So, in other words, time is of the essence. In fact, there was an op-ed in I think Politico, maybe it was Washington Post today, about have we passed the point of no return with regard to having enough time to actually do an impeachment? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that you do what's the right thing to do. Buck, thanks for your call. You're spot on about Mitch McConnell, and Barbara was spot on about the whole situation. It's nuts. We'll be back with more of your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Anything Goes Friday. Back with your calls right after this. We're reading from the Mueller report. This is from Section 1, Part 1, and page 11. And this is from the part titled The Special Counsel's Investigation, which is describing the scope of it. The special counsel, the order stated, is authorized to conduct the investigation confirmed by then FBI Director James B. Comey in testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on March 20th, 2017, including 1. Any links and or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump, and 2, any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, and 3, any other matters within the scope of 28 CFR 600.4. Appointment order. Section 600.4 affords the special counsel, quote, the authority to investigate and prosecute federal crimes committed in the course of and with the intent to interfere with the special counsel's investigation, such as perjury, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and intimidation of witnesses. End of quote. The authority to investigate, quote, any matters that arose during the investigation, end quote, appointment order B2, covers similar crimes that may have occurred during the course of the FBI's confirmed investigation before the special counsel's appointment. Quote, if the special counsel believes it is necessary and appropriate, the order further provided, the special counsel is authorized to prosecute federal crimes arising from the investigation of these matters. Finally, the acting attorney general made applicable sections 600.4 through 600.10 of Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The acting attorney general further clarified the scope of the special counsel's investigatory authority in two subsequent memoranda. A memorandum dated August 2nd, 2017, explained that the appointment order had been, quote, worded categorically in order to permit its public release without confirming specific investigations involving specific individuals, end quote. It then confirmed that the special counsel has been authorized since his appointment to investigate allegations that 3 Trump campaign officials, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, and George Papadopoulos, quote, committed a crime or crimes by colluding with Russian government officials with respect to the Russian government's efforts to interfere with the 2016 presidential campaign, or election, end quote. The memorandum also confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate certain other matters, including 2 additional sets of allegations involving Manafort, parenthesis, crimes arising from payments he received from the Ukrainian government, and crimes arising from his receipt of loans from a bank whose CEO was then seeking a position in the Trump administration, close parenthesis. Allegations that Papadopoulos committed a crime or crimes by acting as an unregistered agent of the Israeli government, and 4 sets of allegations involving Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to President Trump. On October 20th, 2017, the acting attorney general confirmed in a memorandum the special counsel's investigative authority as to several individuals and entities. First, quote, as part of a full and thorough investigation of the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, the special counsel was authorized to investigate, quote, the pertinent activities of Michael Cohen, Richard Gates, redacted, Roger Stone, and redacted. Confirmation, quote, confirmation of the authorization to investigate such individuals, close quote, the memorandum stressed, quote, does not suggest that the special counsel has made a determination that any of them has committed a crime, end quote. Second, with respect to Michael Cohen, the memorandum recognized the special counsel's authority to investigate, quote, leads related to Cohen's establishment and use of Essential Consultants LLC to, inter alia, receive funds from Russian-backed entities, end quote. Third, the memorandum memorialized the special counsel's authority to investigate individuals and entities who were possibly engaged in jointly undertaken activity with existing subjects of the investigation, including Paul Manafort. Finally, the memorandum described an FBI investigation opened before the special counsel's appointment into allegations that then Attorney General Jeff Sessions made false statements to the United States Senate and confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate that matter. The special counsel structured the investigation in view of his power and authority to, quote, exercise all investigative and prosecutorial functions of any United States attorney, end quote. Like a U.S. Attorney's office, the special counsel's office considered a range of classified and unclassified information available to the FBI in the course of the office's Russia investigation. And the office structured that work around evidence for possible use in prosecutions of federal crimes, assuming that one or more crimes was identified that warranted prosecution. There was substantial evidence immediately available to the special counsel at the inception of the investigation in May 2017 because the FBI had, by that time, already investigated Russian election interference for nearly 10 months. The special counsel's office exercised its judgment regarding what to investigate and did not, for instance, investigate every public report of a contact between the Trump campaign and Russian-affiliated individuals and entities. The office has included its investigation into links and coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Certain proceedings associated with the office's work remain ongoing. After consultation with the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, the office has transferred responsibility for those remaining issues to other components of the Department of Justice and the FBI. Appendix D lists those transfers. I would add 12 of the 14 are redacted. So this is reading from the Mueller Report, Part 1, Section 1.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. 34 minutes past the hour. Maine in Chicago. Hey, Maine, what's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
Yeah, I wanted to speak on trickle down. If we don't get rid of trickle down economics, to me, any and everything we're saying is just blowing smoke up the American people's butts. I mean, because we've had to deal with this for nearly 40 years. And now it's just like here in Chicago, like they redline the west and south sides. And they haven't lifted the red line for 51 years. So they talk about economic development, but how you going to have economic development if you don't lift these red lines that you put down on the west and south sides, just like trickle down? How are we going to have a good economy if we don't get rid of trickle down?
I agree with you, man. You're singing my song. Trickle-down economics has been the economic. This neoliberal idea has been the economic state,
the bane of America.
Yeah, and it's been real since the 1980s, since Ronald Reagan introduced it. And by the way, we had this before. It was in the 1920s. We had the exact same thing. They called it horse and sparrow economics. That if you fed the horse more oats than he needed, he would poop more oats, and the sparrows, the little people, would be able to eat them. That was trickle down in the 1920s, and also in the 1880s, excuse me. So, it's like the conservatives always go back to this, oh, well, you've got to feed the really rich people in order for the average people to have any kind of life. And it's, as you know, Maine, it's total BS, and I completely agree with you. Very well said. Thank you very much. Charles in Summerfield, North Carolina. Charles, what's on your mind today?
Tom, a couple of, probably a little over a month ago, I called and let you know about my local precinct committee meeting that I attended and how it was me and 3 other people, and they weren't very enthusiastic. I wanted to give you an update. I went to the county meeting here in Guilford County in North Carolina. Oh, my gosh, what a difference. It was a room full of excited, engaged individuals. There were lots of resolutions that had bubbled up from the precincts that were discussed and are now going to be submitted to the state party meeting. It was a night and day difference. It was a night and day difference. And I realized that with my last call, I had painted kind of a bleak picture. But one other update I wanted to give you was one of the things that caught my attention during the meeting was they made note of how many precincts there were in the county and how many people were represented at the meeting that day. And there were a number of precincts that weren't there. And when I got to talking to someone and I asked them about that, they very quietly informed me that some of the precincts actually don't even have any people registered as precinct committee people.
Wow.
And I thought, what a great opportunity for someone to get engaged. All they need to know is know about it.
Yeah.
And they can, if that's their precinct, all they have to do is contact the county party, or the city party if in their area, find out about your precinct, and if there's nobody there, it's now you and the people that you can gather together to start the process to get it start to flow upward to the national party as to what we want to have happen.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Charles, thanks so much for sharing that with us and for encouraging people to get active in their local Democratic Party.
And again, I lay all blame at you for telling me about it in the first place on your show and getting me involved and active in getting the process started.
Well, I hope you're having fun.
I am. I'm enjoying it immensely.
Great.
My wife, on the other hand, she's not totally on board simply because she doesn't really understand all this politics stuff sometimes. But, yeah it's working out well.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully, if you're having fun, that kind of echoes into the rest of your life, and your wife will not hold that, or will be pleased about that. Charles, thank you for the call. Morgan in Springfield, Oregon. Hey, Morgan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. Thanks for watching us on YouTube.
I have a question about the polling data that's just come out with Bernie and Biden. And I've listened to a couple of different commentaries on it, and it seems like they're not including polling data for people under 50.
There was,
So,
I've seen 2 or 3, threads on various message boards this morning complaining that a poll was quoted in the media that was only people 50 plus, and that Biden was way ahead on it. It's really, and that may be, and they'll probably fix that. I noticed that Bernie is at the top of the list over in the Daily Kos poll, although he's been going down. And I think Elizabeth Warren might have been second, but but on the national polls, Biden's doing really well. So we'll see how this shakes out. I mean, we're as far out as we are right now. Jimmy Carter was at 4% back in 1980, or back in 1979, as they were leading up to 1980. John Kerry was nowhere in 2003 in terms of polling at this point. I mean, it's really too early for anybody to freak out or to think that they've got it nailed down. And so, I get what you're saying, Morgan, but, I think this too shall pass. Morgan, thank you for the call. Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm going to try not to explode, but you could probably guess I'm so mad at what is going on here with Barr, with Trump, with the GOPs. I mean, these.
Well, let me add to your fire, Michael. Donald Trump right now is tweeting and bragging in the media about how he had an hour-long meeting with Mr. President Putin this morning, and brought him up to date on the Barr report and the Barr cover-up and the Mueller report, and did not bring up Russian involvement in our elections. Didn't bring it up at all. It's kind of weird,
But it comes down to interrogation right now, because I would say you're going for years saying no collusion, no corruption, none of this or that. What the hell are you doing conferring with Putin on a matter that is basically supposed to be in the U.S.?
Yeah.
It's a matter on you. Right. You have to inform Putin of.
I get it. I get it, Michael. And by the way, Trump said that the call was mostly about Venezuela, and that probably is not a bad thing, because this is a potential flashpoint that could conceivably get us into a war with Venezuela, with Russia rather. And the way that Trump characterized it was like, he said to Putin, don't mess with Venezuela and just leave it to us. And he's saying that Putin said, okay, that's fine with me. I have a hard time believing that, but that's what Donald Trump told the press this morning.
And then you have the GOP's backing Trump up and engaging in this cover-up as well. To me, that's aiding and abetting a crime, aiding and abetting a criminal. And you're covering up for Barr. You want to give him a free pass. This is the same party that wanted to chastise Bill Clinton for a Monica Gate, and that was something that was nothing compared to what we're facing here. So my recommendation is, I think I mentioned to you that, we go forth with the impeachment hearings, and then take note of each and every Republican that votes in favor of Barr and votes in favor of Trump, and then that's what you build on in the 2020 election. But not only that, I, for one, want Trump, Barr, and every single one of these GOPs thrown in prison for the criminals that they are.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's me.
Well, no, and Michael, there's a lot of people who share your sentiment, and I think that John Mitchell went to prison for doing what Bill Barr did, and he went to prison for 19 months. He was Richard Nixon's attorney general, and Bill Barr should be very, very nervous right now, because there's not just civilians, not just us citizens out here who are thinking like you are, Michael, but there are lawyers and legislators, and no doubt people, I guarantee you, people in the Department of Justice who are thinking the same thing. This guy's our boss? Really? Michael, thank you for the call. Corey in Las Vegas. Hey, Corey, what's up?
Oh, thank you for taking my call. I'm a first-time caller, actually.
Well, thank you, Corey.
And I have a question for you. I want to follow it up with a comment, and you could draw your answer from the comment as well. Excuse me. Have you had a chance to read through the entire Mueller report, the redacted version?
I have not. I've probably read 60% of it.
You read it to us.
Well, I know I spent probably 4 or 5 hours with it when it first became available. What was that, a week and a half ago? And, you know, most of what I read was part 2, the obstruction stuff, where they're actually laying out the crimes. The part 1 stuff I just skipped through. And I haven't read the appendixes. The most relevant appendix is the one that lists the 14 investigations, criminal investigations that they're continuing to pursue, that they turned over to William Barr, and those are all redacted.
Got you. Did you
why
run
do you ask?
into any section of that report that alludes to voter suppression?
Voter suppression, to the best of my knowledge, no. You know, it's interesting. I've got, actually, you know, this is, maybe we should do a show on this sometime where it's just, you know, call in and and tell me what you want me to search the Mueller report on. I have it open, and let me just plug in voter. The word voter appears 488 times in the report. Voter fraud, voter fraud, voter fraud, blah, 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 blah. Let's see, voter suppression.
So there is something in there about voter fraud.
Yeah, there's a lot of something in there about voter fraud, but I'm not seeing voter suppression show up anywhere.
Well, I wonder if suppression and fraud would be synonymous.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
In that report.
I just searched the word suppression, in fact, and I'm not getting any hits. So that's not coming up. So.
Well, I bring it up because there have been reports, if I'm not mistaken, there have been reports regarding the Russian meddling that they did target black voters via social media and try to tip the scales as far as how they voted. Is that not correct?
That's, you know, yeah, that's my understanding. Well, it was, yeah, I'm not sure you could call that voter suppression. It was, you know, clearly misinformation, yeah.
Well, that's not voter suppression, but I'm wondering if they would go one step further. I wouldn't know how, or, you know, how they would mess around in the actual machinations of the voting process.
Right.
But,
you know, Corey, let me go back and search through it and see if there's anything about voting machines or voting infrastructure or whatever. And if I find anything, I'll make note of it and I'll report it to you on Monday, okay?
And I hear the music, so there's no time for my comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got a boogie. Corey, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Because Congressman Khanna was with us in our second hour today, Luke Vargas's report has been moved to the third hour. So in 4 minutes, we'll be back with Luke Vargas with Talk Media News. And welcome back. Jim in Los Angeles. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Professor. The reason we must start impeachment is because cover-up lying AG has made it obvious they and all Republicans are trying to run out the clock. We got to start impeachment on Barr first and then start impeachment of Trump. You know, shame all the Republican senators and congressmen that are protecting criminals and serving only the billionaire oligarchs who are mentally ill hoarders and evil, and greed is evil, and we have to you know, oligarchs only care about their taxes and burning humans alive for profit, which Republicans are going along with, and Pelosi must do what's right, not what is politically expeditious. And also one thing on the vote is we have to let the vote counters and poll workers, let them know they will go to jail. If they try anything, they will go to jail when we have a Democratic president.
Well, it certainly has not happened up to this point, Jim, but I totally agree with all of your sentiments. Thank you very much for the call. Ed in Elkin, North Carolina. Ed, what's on your mind?
I have a couple of things about climate change. I recently read an article that the plankton in the ocean produces 50% of the oxygen in the atmosphere, and that the amount of plankton in the ocean has dropped by 40%. Have you heard that? I've
not heard about the drop. You know, and there's, My understanding is that the life forms, the diatoms, and I forget the name of the I don't know if it's phylum, class, order, what it is, but of the little tiny creatures that have shells but are microscopic, like krill, for example, or nearly microscopic, that whales eat, that they are crashing because of the acidification of the ocean. But they are not the plants that produce the little single-cell plant organisms that produce most of the oxygen. So I frankly don't know the status of the plants. I think that if the plants were going, there'd be a whole lot more hair on fire screaming from the scientific community right now.
Well, when I read that, it actually, I got chills. I mean, if that doesn't scare you, nothing will.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I watched a couple of videos. There's a guy that mounts a camera on his car and drives different parts of the country, scenic parts of the country. Well, he's got two videos. One's going from Denver west on Interstate 70, and the other one is coming back. And what I noticed is almost all the way through the video, there are dead trees. Some places it looks like there's more than 50, 60% of the trees are dead.
Yep. Yeah, so and this is climate change is encouraging the growth of both fungus, both infections like rust, and also predators, the insects that drill into these trees and allow them to be infected. So yeah, and this has been going on, by the way, for about 30 years in a big way. This is one of the things that's happening in Europe. Germans are absolutely freaked out about it. It's called rust, this destruction of their forests. So spot on, Ed. Ed, I'm out of time, but we'll be back in just a moment. Luke Vargas is going to be taking your calls. Excuse me, Luke Vargas is going to fill us in on what the news of the day is, and we'll be right back with that. And that'll be pretty much it for Anything Goes Friday. So Nick, let people who are on hold know that we're not going to be taking any more calls. We'll be back with Luke Vargas in just a moment. We put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Check it out at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Let's check in with Luke Vargas and talk media news and find out what's going on in the world today. Luke's the chief foreign correspondent for Talk Media News. He joins us from New York. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. And Luke also does a 2-minute podcast that you can find wherever you get your podcasts. Luke, Trump's national security team met with the Pentagon officials today to discuss Venezuela. Also, Trump is telling the media, this was just in the last hour, that he had an hour-long phone conversation with Putin this morning, and that President Putin said that he was not going to stop Donald Trump from intervening in Venezuela, or words to that effect, or at least that's my understanding just from, what I've read and looking at the chyrons on TV. What the hell is going on here?
Yeah, there's a lot to try and keep track of, and perhaps my report here is less about really trying to say with much clarity what's going on and more just sort of laying out the signs that we're hearing. So let's talk first. The acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan met today with Pompeo and Bolton alongside the head of the Navy in the Southern Command, Admiral Craig Fowler. And what they basically said is that, according to the Associated Press, they reviewed and refined military planning and options for responding to the crisis, end quote. And I would say it's worth just sort of putting out there that this phrase, all options are on the table, can either mean something really is being considered seriously, but let's just be careful and acknowledge it's also a truism about politics that doesn't necessarily mean anything in and of itself. That, most politicians will say all options are on the table, even if nothing is really being planned.
Sure.
And it's worth pointing out we have seen that from reports back in late February, early March, that it was reported that the bulk of the U.S. military planning vis-a-vis Venezuela in the last few months considered plans to extract U.S. Nationals from the country, as well as American diplomats. And those diplomats were all withdrawn in March, which I think sort of possibly could explain why the Pentagon officials have had so many meetings on Venezuela. And yet you look at some of the sort of political incitement, if you will, to, try to drum up concerns that, the Venezuelan crisis is a disproportionately, threatening one. And there's also a lot to be worried of. I mean, you can brush off all those things you want and maybe even say, especially if there are any Russian personnel on the ground, Trump would never go and do anything in Venezuela. None of the neighbors, Colombia or Brazil, are in favor of military action. So this would need to be extraordinarily unilateral. And yet you're still hearing a larger group of people than just, let's say, Cuba hawks who are talking about this seriously. Marco Rubio just saying the other day that, we're basically proud as America to be able to project our military power anywhere. You have the FAA putting flight restrictions over Venezuela. You even had Republican Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida saying on the Tucker Carlson program the other day that Russia had already deployed nuclear weapons to Venezuela, which is an incredibly unfounded claim. He had no evidence to suggest this.
He's trying to create a Cuban Missile Crisis environment.
He is, and clearly they're completely different. And yet, when I then saw a statement from the Navy admiral, who again is sort of in charge of the military planning here, where the other day he said Venezuela is quintessentially an issue of freedom versus tyranny, end quote. I mean, it's concerning when you see military planners who are supposed to just sort of approach these things objectively, buying kind of hook, line, and sinker into the ideological framing of this issue. I don't believe from any of the sort of signals intelligence that we're picking up on that there is anything imminent. But you look towards 2020, and you just worry that all these people are laying, not a military groundwork, but a political groundwork, so that if at some point Trump, in the heat of a re-election campaign, when socialism is on the agenda, wants to really try and fight socialism in the flesh, one worries that these little crumbs we're seeing right now could be part of the ideological argument made at that later date. So
and let's not forget, in 2010, Trump tweeted that any day now, Barack Obama is going to start a war because the elections are coming. I mean, he thinks that way.
Exactly.
That scares the hell out of me, Luke. Luke Vargas, Talk Media News. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
And check out Luke's podcast. It's great. Thanks so much for being with us today and this week. We'll be back on Monday. Have a great, safe, wonderful family, whatever weekend. Do it the best you can. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It does require all of us. And that includes you and, frankly, everybody you know. Tell them about progressive media. Tell them what's going on. Get out there, get active, tag. You're it. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.